Hello there, people, and welcome to Friday Flight. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. Another week and another batch of email feedback to get to this particular week. But, of course, before diving in, I have to dive into this week's particular brew, if you will. And I'm going to an old favorite, if you will, an old favorite brewery, Bell's Brewery up in Comstock, Michigan. People here in Michigan know them all too well for their Two-Hearted Ale, and also for Oberon. It's one of my favorites, the American Wheat Ale as well. I also love their Winter White Ale. My baby sister Erica once gave that to me for Christmas because she knows I'm a beer snob, and she's also a beer snob in her own way as well. But today we're trying a robust porter from Bell's Brewery. What does it say here? Let's see. Our award-winning Bell's Porter bridges the gap between malty brown ales and heavily roasted stouts. Notes of chocolate, coffee, and roasted barley are offset with just a slight hop bitterness. Enjoy any time of year. 5.6% by volume. Alcohol, that is. Well, we tried that chocolate stout or whatever it was last week, and yeah, that didn't go over well. So hopefully Bell's will be better. Let's crack it open here. All right, let's give it a taste, shall we? All right. It's similar, but not quite as dark chocolatey sweet. It's still like the chocolate's there, but I don't want to say it's like weaker, but it has more heft and is more robust in this regard instead of being just, sickly sweet like I'm, drinking like uh, dark chocolate Hershey bar or something like that. So, yeah, this isn't bad. This is not bad at all from Bell's Brewery. Of course, Bell's it's a staple up here, one of the many breweries that we've got up in Michigan. But that's today's flight, if you will, with respect to the beer portion. Here you go. All right. Now that we got that out of the way, let's dive into your email feedback for this week. John R. starts us off, as always, customarily with a series of emails. Let's start with this one. This is the one that I think he told me he had second thoughts on, or he had a follow-up that he wanted to continue with. So we might end up reading the follow-up here later because I think he sent that not too long after we had a conversation on Threads. But this first one that he sent is called What Does a Minecraft Movie Mean for Superman? And he said, I wanted to write this on Sunday just to see how well a Minecraft movie did. It did incredibly well. He said film as of this email, when he sent it, just broke the biggest global opening weekend of all time for a video game movie with slightly above $300 million, $157 million domestically, which means it doubled its budget. I don't know if was it that high? I thought it was 157 domestically. Hang on. Or 157 overall. Hang on. I just want to double check those numbers real quick here because I think that might have been slightly, I don't know. Let's verify this just for a second here. Yeah, so the opening weekend was 157 million worldwide. Because right now, as of this Friday, the April 11th, it's at 351 million worldwide, which is still incredible in 7 days, to be honest with you. That's a hell of a start. But at any rate, just clarifying that, he said much of the industry wrote this movie off because the trailers were, let's be honest, very cringe for a lot of people, even for some people who play the game. He says it also got mixed reactions from critics who are clearly becoming less detrimental as the years go by, but then again, the audience reaction wasn't exactly overwhelmingly positive. Despite these hurdles, it does show the IP is in fact very strong. He says, I remember a buddy of mine, Shane, who never cared for video games, was obsessed with Minecraft back in the day, and I've even played it too from time to time, so I can't say it's that big of a surprise. But he says, so with that being said, what would this mean for Superman if it has a smaller opening weekend? If a film like a Minecraft movie with iffy at best marketing can be this much of a hit, does that mean if Superman has a lower opening weekend that this would be embarrassing for DC? That WB has dragged the DC brand through the mud so much that another one of their films they marketed poorly still ends up being a hit? I'm sure you will disagree, he says, and maybe I'm looking at this simply on a surface level, but Superman has been in the top 4 most anticipated films of the summer. There's always the chance a Minecraft movie has shorter legs than Superman, but what do you think? Do you think Superman making less money than Minecraft isn't as grim as I'm making it out to be? Well, yeah, I do disagree with your entire premise, and I do think it's surface level, because the thing is, why are we comparing it to Minecraft? Like, that's, remember Barbenheimer? The Barbenheimer phenomenon that studios have mistakenly tried to recreate. The idea that, organically Barbie and Oppenheimer were set for the same release date and everybody just kind of made that a phenomenon because there was really no reason for either of them to switch. They weren't necessarily approaching the same target audience. But because Barbenheimer organically grew as a fan campaign and became its own marketing monster, there were people like me that saw both movies. Now, was I always going to see both movies? Perhaps. I was definitely going to see Oppenheimer. I don't know that I was going to see Barbie at the theater, but I did because, in part, of Barbenheimer. I wanted to do the experience, right? So the thing is, it's all a crapshoot, is what I'm trying to say here. Did anybody predict that Barbie would break $1 billion? No. Did anybody predict that Oppenheimer would make close to $1 billion? With part of that propelled by the success of the whole Barbenheimer experience. No, I don't think so. Like, I mean, whatever people at Forbes or anybody else says, a lot of this is a crapshoot. And I know we all try to predict and we all try to find the numbers and the multipliers and all that shit, but the box office is a crapshoot. It really is. And basically these studios are trying to make as much money in the first weekend or two as they can to recoup their costs and show a return on investment. They can't invest wholly in legs, right? I mean, that can be part of the forecast, and that may be part of what they sell to their shareholders, but it's all a crapshoot. I mean, they're literally rolling the dice, right? And all the marketing in the world doesn't mean that people are actually going to go see it. Doesn't mean that people are actually going to go check it out, right? Because look at the Snow White thing. I can say that I didn't see any marketing, and you can say that you didn't see any marketing. Somebody out there in 8.5 billion people is saying, no, the marketing was insane and annoying, and I'm so tired of seeing Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot's face. Somebody out there is saying that. So again, it's all subjective. But the idea that if Superman doesn't open as strongly as Minecraft, John, I feel like you're buying into a narrative already, right? Like, it's almost like sometimes they don't need our help in order to craft narratives, right? Like, we don't need to give them narratives. And I feel like you've crafted one based off of what you think they might say. And I totally get why you would do that. I totally get where that comes from, but we don't need to help them. They've already got a line of narratives and a line of headlines that they're going to throw out there if, in fact, Superman does bomb or doesn't have a great opening weekend in July, which I certainly hope it does not. But yeah, we don't need to help them by, giving them a point of emphasis, because I could just see that asshole Scott Mendelson, if he's still at Forbes or wherever, and I could see other critics and other bloggers and Collider and whatnot going, wow, Superman couldn't even surpass Minecraft. The DC brand has been destroyed. And then here it comes all the way back to Zack Snyder being the one that ultimately shot it in the head, and now it's a festering corpse that has to be put down because it can never be sold again, which I still believe is complete and utter bullshit. But like I said, John, we don't need to help them with narratives. But we had a conversation with respect to the whole idea of putting the sneak peek in front of the Minecraft movie, and I do wonder if your follow-up email that you have here, which I'm going to skip straight to that because you did have another two emails beforehand, but I'm going to skip to that follow up to first email question. And it looks like you simply have a question, which is your theory that you think a part of Minecraft's success is because of the Superman sneak peek. The idea that some people, knowing the sneak peek was going to be there, may have shown up en masse, and that might be an indicator for Superman, I don't agree with that either. And the reason I don't agree with that either is because I don't think the general audience was aware that the sneak peek was coming. I really don't. I think that the sneak peek was something that we knew about, something that we were aware of because we're fans and we're, heavily connected to this. And even if we tell our friends and family, we still don't make up enough for that many people to have gone to see Minecraft on opening weekend. So no, I do not believe that the Superman sneak peek had much, if anything, to do with the opening weekend of Minecraft. I don't. And I also don't believe that it should be compared. I really don't. Because the idea, I mean, again, we don't need to give, any more cannon fodder to the critics, with respect to comparison, and we're going to be critical of whatever marketing, we're already critical of whatever marketing DC Studios is doing for Superman, right? And if we don't think it's enough, we're going to be the first ones to blame it for why, it didn't do well, while others rather, I should say, not everybody else, will be blaming Zack Snyder because they'll find a way to twist this in true nerd MAGA fashion, because at that point, yes, they will be flat out acting like nerd MAGA if they're going to reach all the way back to Zack Snyder to blame for whatever marketing issues DC Studios has, or for not winning the crapshoot that is the opening weekend for Superman. It'll have nothing to do with Zack Snyder, absolutely nothing. It'll have everything to do with the current regime not necessarily hitting their targets, if you will, right? But reaching all the way back to blame Zack Snyder, doesn't it seem like it's, reaching all the way to blame Sleepy Joe? It just seems like that, doesn't it? At least it does to me. All right. I try not to get too political, but I also don't hide my political beliefs here. Everybody should know that by this point. At any rate, here, let's go back to your other emails here. You had a second one titled Snyder cultists are going to shoot themselves in the foot. Okay, well, so far I agree with that. John says, if Superman makes 750 million or more dollars, this is going to be embarrassing for the Snyder cultists. I'm sure they'll use mental gymnastics. Man of Steel made more adjusted for inflation. Gun versus a flop. Yep, more than likely. He says, but I've also seen people who liked the Snyderverse now disavow the films because the cult is so toxic. As long as these people, along with the anti-Snyder cult, exist on the internet, it is never going to be fun to talk to people about nerd stuff online. I think I would rather just talk to DeepSeek or ChatGPT at this point. But, he says, what if Superman beats Man of Steel's inflation numbers? Like if it does make $1 billion, what will the cult's excuse be then? Well, they're not going to really have anywhere to run at that point, John. I mean, because essentially that will be the nail in the coffin for any idea of Warner Brothers selling DC to Netflix and, them restoring the Snyderverse in that regard. And it'll be even worse if Zack Snyder, goes and sees the movie and lends his positive review to his buddy James Gunn, which I very well think could happen. I think he and Debbie could see that movie and they may enjoy it and he may talk about what he enjoys about it. I would love for it. It would be amazing. Be amazing for, everything in general, for the fandom in general, and also for somebody like Dave the Film Junkie, if Zach went back on Vodka Stream and talked about how much he enjoyed the new Superman movie. That would be great. That'd be amazing. I'm not predicting that'll happen. I'm not calling. I mean, I would love for it to happen, but at that point, I think, John, that the cultist would have no choice but to turn on Zack himself, which is kind of the end game with all of this, right? What cult mentality ultimately turns on its leader and destroys itself from the inside. And that's the next end game for the Snyder cultists, is to turn on Zack and to say that he is a traitor and they were misled and it's all his fault and that's why none of this is happening, right? Like I do think that that's more than likely horrifically what will occur. And if that happens, then, it might be a good idea for us, might help us out, those of us rational Snyder fans that, just want to push the cult into a deep, dark corner and never hear from them again, right? But, obviously, if the movie, well, that's one half of our battle finished in that regard, John, because obviously, if Superman does make $1 billion, well, that's all that the other side needs to tout it as, oh, well, thank the Lord that James Gunn has saved DC from the evil clutches of Zack Snyder. Yeah, there will be dumbasses and trolls saying that. However, we can take comfort in the fact that regardless of what happens, the $1 billion will have nothing to do with the cultists on either side. It will have everything to do with the general audience, who largely does not know or care about either of these stupid ass cults. And they will be touting how awesome they think Superman is, and it will become, prevalent in the general consciousness of the general public, and hopefully steal the public zeitgeist. If it makes $1 billion, it most certainly will latch onto the public zeitgeist. And I tell you what, it'll be interesting because I read today earlier, Thunderbolts, the press tour for Thunderbolts is ramping up for Marvel. And I do not mean to make this tribalistic. I hate the flippant tribalism, but I just want to say this with respect to superheroes as a genre and how those of us DC fans that have been kind of waiting for a moment where the tide might actually turn in terms of one, particular franchise being more popular than the other. We saw what Captain America Brave New World, has done and did at the box office, and, they keep touting it as, lower than expected numbers and underperforming, right? They can't call it a bomb, but they can call it underperforming. Well, some probably are calling it a bomb. And that it didn't do well critically. Well, I read earlier today that apparently, and you can't trust the source, with a grain of salt on this, but allegedly, early tracking for Thunderbolts on May 2nd is less than that for the opening America of Captain America: Brave New World. So there's a possibility that that movie does not open nearly as well and doesn't perform nearly as well as they might hope. And certainly at this point, because of the $1 billion fools, the very unrealistic delusional expectations of thinking that all these movies should make $1 billion purely based on their pedigree of either being Marvel or DC, right? Those people are holding the MCU up to such a highly like improbable and an impossible standard at this point. Especially after 17 years of being on top and not even counting the 2020 stuff, that they're going to look at anything less than $1 billion for Thunderbolts as a failure or underperforming, right? So let's say that happens. Let's say that occurs and Thunderbolts doesn't hit that mythical $1 billion expectation. And then right after that, a month and a half later, Superman does. Well, now what are you talking about? Now we're talking about the potential of a narrative, especially if it's critically received. We're talking about a narrative where people are actually saying that not only has DC taken the lead, but also they'll say, imagine this headline. Now, this is something that, because we can envision popularity for our own franchise, and, those of us that were looking for the humbling of the MCU fans, which most certainly has and is occurring, imagine a headline that says, James Gunn brings Marvel magic to DC. Imagine that, right? Imagine this idea that he takes what he had at Marvel and the idea, some people asserting correctly or not, and it will be completely subjective, and I won't agree with it necessarily. But they'll basically be saying that he took Marvel, the last of what Marvel had, the last good that they had, and brought it to DC, and now DC is rising to prominence as a result of it, right? I could see Tatiana Siegel or some other fool writing that. I absolutely could see that. And while, as a DC fan, the glory that we've kind of, de facto wanted for the last 9 or 10 years for a DC shared cinematic universe in terms of success, right? While we'll be enjoying that, on the other hand, it'll still just be encouraging more tribalism, and then, the Marvel fans, they'll really start to, because the sides will really start to shift, and they'll really be like in our position in that regard, the position that we've been in for the last number of years. And that won't be fair, and again, it's not something that I will agree with if and when it happens, but I could see that happening if Superman does reach $1 billion, right? And then it'll come down to what Fantastic Four First Steps does, right, as to whether or not that will encourage any further tribalism from all these morons and bloggers and critics and whatnot. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, those are my thoughts with respect to what happens if Superman does succeed, if it does beat up Man of Steel. I think the Snyder cult will turn on itself, and then I think there could be a real significant shift in the narrative with respect to the Marvel and DC franchises, which of course I'm not interested in like piloting any narrative. Do I want DC to succeed? Yes, I do. Do I kind of want the tide to turn? Yeah, because Marvel's been on top for a long time. It's time for DC to rise up. And I do hope that happens, but I'm not going to be the one saying neener, neener, na 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 na. I'm not going to be doing that to Marvel fans. No, certainly not. Why? Not at all. I'm only the assholes, right? Only the snarky ones that, kept trying to act like DC was dead and blah 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 and talked all that shit for the last 10 years. Like that those are a different breed, but not the rational Marvel fans. I still believe, of course, in it's okay to like them all. But I'm getting ahead of myself because we have no idea. We still got a couple of months before we see exactly what Superman does at the box office. So let's wait and see exactly what happens. So here's another email from John R. called We're a Cork in the Ocean. Oh, he's back to Beach Boys. Because he says, Sorry, Ray, I must continue my Beach Boys obsession because it is relevant to your show earlier in the week. All right. He wrote this a couple of days ago. He says, I am, of course, referring to the opening lyrics to the Beach Boys song Till I Die from their 1971 album Surf's Up. The lyrics are actually, I'm a cork in the ocean. Why am I referring to these lyrics, some of you may ask? Because fandom are corks in the ocean. The Snyder cultists, the Gunn cultists, the Kevin Feige cultists, they are all corks in the ocean. Meanwhile, the general audience are the ocean. Would be cool if you could play a clip of the opening lines from the song, but I don't know if you can. No, I can't, because, not going to get, sued. So, but at any rate, he says, sorry, getting sidetracked here, Ray. Nothing you said Monday was wrong. Monday was the Flightcast episode where I eviscerated both the Snyder and the anti-Snyder cult about Superman. He said, these people cannot let go of their ego. You know what I love about you, Ray? He says, you have the ability that many people struggle with. You can push aside your ego. These internet nerd QAnon folks, they don't have that ability. Hell, I don't have that ability most of the time. I'm trying to do better. I've been getting into meditation. I've been spending time talking to my girlfriend and friends. I'm following your advice, and I'm trying to find my peace of mind, and I encourage other listeners to give it a try. I want to apologize for the earlier emails. I feel like I need to backtrack on some of the things I said. Feel free to read them, but your episode made me think about things. I don't want to be a cork in the ocean. I want to be the ocean. Why do we give these folks power? Who are they to tell us what is proper? That we should conform to their way of thinking because we supposedly have bad taste in movies? F them. And I'm referring to both sides of the shit coin, of course. Ray, listening to you on Monday was like listening to James Brown and the Blues Brothers. Oh, the Reverend Cleophas James, yes, from the Triple Rock. I love that movie. And I love that scene. It's a fantastic scene. Jesus H. Tap dance in Christ. I have seen the light. That's what he wrote, which is, of course, taken straight from the blasphemous mouth of Jake Blues, played by the late great John Belushi in that film. But John says, seriously, everyone, Ray is right. We need to do better. We need to take the high road and mute and block these things I have ironically called corks. The irony being, muting and blocking can be used as a metaphor for corks. Oh, yes, that's very true. Yes, I know I sound a little wacky in this email, he says, but sometimes I need repeated listens to have the point nailed across. I trust James Gunn to make a great Superman movie. Warner Brothers trust Gunn. Zack Snyder trusts Gunn. I will, in fact, say, prove to me that you're bad July 10th or 11th, depending on my schedule. By the end of Monday's show, I slow clap because it just made sense. As I said last show, I have a new motto. I won't engage, I'll turn the page till I die. Circling back to the song. Well, I think out of all the emails you sent this week, John, that's the one that I agree with the most. And I thank you for the kind words. I'm not as great about pushing back my ego as perhaps as much as you say I am, but I do appreciate that you considered me that in that regard. It can be difficult. It can be really difficult because, sometimes people just say shit that bugs you and you just feel the need to respond to their foolishness and prove them wrong and embarrass them in front of others. But I'm reaching that point where it's like, you know what? I don't want to boost them. I don't want to give them that energy or that attention. I just want to get rid of them. I just want them to be gone. I just never wish to see any of their bullshit ever again. And, Threads has helped me with that because the hide for everyone feature is amazing. When people post stupid shit on your thread, you can hide for everyone and then immediately block them and no one will ever see their shit. No one will respond to their shit. No one will like their shit. It's not even a case of, oh, you've blocked them, but the shit is still there and other idiots can like it and then comment to you. No, their shit will be completely hidden and nobody will ever see it again. And I love that feature. And that feature helps me a lot, because I get the satisfaction. That's where my ego is stroked, John, because my satisfaction is that, yeah, no one will ever see your dumb shit ever again, troll. So, choke on that. But John, thank you for the kind words about Monday's show, and I hope that, we can all do better and that we can all just not boost and amplify these clowns and morons any further. We will do the best that we can. I believe that we will do the best that we can with respect to that. So thank you for the kind words on that, John. Thank you for the feedback. As always, good sir, let us move forward and look forward to the comic book movie realm, especially Superman on, like you said, July 10th or 11th. We'll see what it does. We hope it does well. All right, next up, Amr Zadan is back with a big email called Catching Up After Ramadan. This email from the surface looks almost Anthony Dorsey email missive size. Let's see how long it takes to get through all of what our good buddy says here. But he says, hey, Ray, hope you're doing well. Ramadan has ended here in Egypt, with Sunday the 30th of March being the last day of fasting and Monday the 31st marking the beginning of Eid. I'm sorry. I apologize, Amr, if I'm mispronouncing it. Please let me know what the right pronunciation is. Is it Eid? Is it Eid? I'm sorry. I really am. He says some countries were able to sight the moon earlier, so they celebrated it a day ahead of us. Since Ramadan is over, I've had the chance to catch up on some shows, he says, including Star Trek The Next Generation and Daredevil, along with a few others. I also missed last week's Friday Flight, he said. If you remember, I left a comment on Threads stating that I didn't know we're now on a weekly basis, as I found out too late. Nevertheless, I'll try keeping me up from now on. This email might be very lengthy, as I'll be talking about a lot. Before we start, he says, I wanted to say I've enjoyed your recent Reddit adventures. It's always funny putting extremist fans in their place and pissing them off. I hope you continue talking about all the stuff you encounter in that site. Yeah, I haven't been on Reddit a whole lot in the last couple of weeks since I've been back on Threads. I've been a lot more vocal on Threads in that regard, but I haven't left Reddit. I'm still going over there. In fact, I've been spending a little bit too much time over at DCU Leaks. Yes, there's some stuff I've seen there that a lot of you probably don't want to see, but I will not be sharing it because it is definitely spoilers. But yeah, I will definitely keep you posted with any other ridiculousness I see over on that site. He says, also regarding your recent episode about the MCU, I agree with everything you said. Me personally, I've long learned to distance myself from fandom talk. I've learned to do that since the DCEU was still up and running, and decided to stay even more firm on my stance since that whole fandom backlash debacle that happened with Star Wars The Last Jedi. Geez, that was something. That whole thing was tiring, he says. It's easier this way. The only thing that matters to me, and I'm sure it's the same for you and everyone listening, is whether I personally enjoy whatever superhero film or TV show that comes out or not. If I do, then hey, that's another to the list of things I enjoy. If not, well, it's not the end of the world. There's always next time. Sure, I might get disappointed and sad, but I move on. I don't do this for just superhero stuff, but for everything. You name it, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, etc. Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right about that Last Jedi nonsense. That was ridiculous, even for somebody like me who lives on the island of there are no bad Star Wars movies, because I really do believe that. Subjectively speaking, from my perspective, there are no bad Star Wars movies. But Amr says, either way, it's very funny to see how the tables have turned. All I can say is, and he puts this in all caps, bolded, comeuppance. The MCU is in no way dying, he says. Sure, it had multiple bumps along the road, but people are still talking about it, whether good things or bad things. It's still in the public consciousness. People still go to them. Sure, not as much as they used to, but that's due to other external factors. And I'm pretty sure the same people that are complaining are the first ones to buy tickets for whatever the next movie is. Same thing with James Gunn's Superman, he says. I guarantee you the ones that are nitpicking and complaining about every single thing about that movie will be there opening day because they will not help themselves. Oh, you got that right. I have said this and I will continue to reiterate this. At least half of the Snyder cultists, at least half of the people hating on Gunn's Superman will see it. They'll see it opening weekend. They will hate watch it. Because what's going to happen is after the movie comes out, we're going to see some specific complaints, and they're going to be too specific for somebody that didn't see the movie. It's going to be, they're going to out themselves, and they're going to prove, oh, you saw it, just like we did. So, Warner Brothers and DC Studios thanks you for your money, dumbasses. Anyway, continuing with Amr's email, he says, now let's talk about Star Trek. I picked up where I left off, starting with episode 14. He's in season 3. And he says, and as of writing this, I have completed the 3rd season. Oh my goodness. Amr is motoring through. This is awesome. He says, man, what a season has it been? This is most definitely the strongest season I've encountered, and according to your commentary, it appears I'm even in more of a ride as I continue. In for even more of a ride, yes. Like last time, I have tons of favorite episodes I want to discuss. I've never encountered such a streak of good episodes compared to the previous 2 seasons. That is a hallmark of Trek Armor. It is not something that the franchise doesn't do. It is a pattern, right? That's how Star Trek Deep Space Nine was. That's how Star Trek Voyager was. I'm sure when I do my actual watch of Enterprise, which is the only Star Trek series outside of Prodigy that I have not watched in its entirety, sure I'll probably find the same thing. But yeah, just get through those first 2 seasons, and then the show really finds its footing in season 3, which I'm sure you could say that about just about every show that comes up. But here, let's talk about your favorite episodes that you've got, because it's not necessarily everything, but you've got a lot to say, and there's some things that I really want to see. Oh my goodness. All right, here we go. Let's dive into this. This is going to be fun. By the way, Alex DeSilva, tread lightly, because he's going for it on a number of these. All right, here we go. So let's start with this particular episode 14, A Matter of Perspective. Oh yeah. He says, what a great episode. The story centers on Commander Riker being accused of murder while visiting a research station. The Enterprise crew uses the holodeck to recreate the testimonies of each witness, uncovering differing perspectives on what actually happened. Yes, very Rashomon indeed. I really enjoyed the courtroom-style structure of the episode, he said, and how it played with the idea of subjective truth. It reminded me a lot of Ridley Scott's The Last Duel, where each perspective adds a new layer to the story, challenging you to decide what the real truth is. Definitely a standout in terms of narrative creativity. The film was written by Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and Nicole Holofcener. I'm probably mispronouncing that as well. If you haven't seen The Last Duel, I highly recommend it. Yeah, that's a recent movie. That's in the last couple of years. And of course, it's a take on Rashomon, which that's a Kurosawa movie, if I'm not mistaken, from way back when, that I actually own as part of my Criterion Collection section of my library, if you will. And I will watch it at one point. But yeah, the different points of view and how it is perceived by others, definitely a time honored technique and device, if you will, for storytelling. And yeah, absolutely. My favorite part of this episode, honestly, Amr, is the idea that it basically proved that the whole Krieger Waves thing was real because the holodeck recreated it so perfectly that it was destroying the ship. It's like, what is going on here? And Jordy's like, yeah, the Krieger Waves actually are real. When we recreated this whole set to figure out whether or not, who was telling the truth with this whole thing with Riker being framed for murder, yeah, we proved that it actually was a thing that this doctor did in framing him and all that. Yeah, it's a good episode. It is a good episode for sure. Oh, but here's a fan favorite. This next one, episode 15, Yesterday's Enterprise. Amr says 2 great episodes back to back is just chef's kiss. The episode delves into time travel and alternate reality shenanigans, and oh boy, did it deliver a great surprise. Tasha is back. I wasn't expecting that at all, and it added such a cool twist to the episode. The alternate reality is very chilling. I knew something was off, not just with Tasha's return, but with the crew's outfits as well. Instead of hearing the usual captain's log followed by the stardate, we hear military log followed by the stardate, which sets up how we are in a very dark timeline. In this timeline, the Federation is at war with the Klingons and losing. As a result of the war, Worf isn't there, and I noticed that Picard and Riker's relationship seemed a bit rocky, likely due to the effects of the war. It's interesting to see how the pressure of the war has impacted their dynamic. He says, also, a surprise guest appeared I recognized. Christopher McDonald as Lieutenant Richard Castillo. Yes, that's right. Shooter McGavin is a Star Trek vet. That is true. He says, that was a fun moment for me as I didn't expect to see him in the series. The stakes felt higher because of how the timeline shifted, and seeing how the crew dealt with the consequences of these changes was both compelling and emotional. Definitely one of the standout episodes for me. In this alternate timeline, he says, since Worf isn't part of Starfleet, I honestly expected him to appear as an antagonist in one of the Klingon ships attacking both Enterprises, but alas, that didn't happen. It would have been interesting to see that, though, especially given how personal the stakes were with the war. Yeah, that would have been cool, and I feel like maybe there might have even been, like, some deleted scenes. Like, I really don't know the behind-the-scenes story with it. Maybe they had originally planned for that to be the case so that they could still involve Michael Dorn in the episode, but still, the point, you got the point was made. Like, you got the point across with respect to that episode. So, yeah, Yesterday's Enterprise is a classic, and I'm going to tell you this, Amr. I'm just gonna give you this hint, if you will. Keep this episode in your mind for the future, because let's just say that the consequences of certain things that happen in this episode are going to screw things up. That's all I'm going to say. A certain thing occurs in this episode that is not a good idea, and it is going to cause the crew of the Enterprise problems going forward. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to remember this episode. This is a big one. This is a watermark episode. This is still a very episodic show in this regard, but this one's going to have consequences. Really heavy consequences. We'll get there. Don't worry. But all right. Glad that you loved it. Let's get into this next one. Episode 16, The Offspring. Oh, yeah, this one's a heartbreaker. He says this episode is a heartwarming exploration of Data creating an android together, Lal, an android daughter, Lal. It delves into the moral dilemmas of artificial life and parenthood, showing Data's emotional growth as he navigates being a father. Lal struggles with her emotions, and her tragic fate adds emotional depth to the episode. The contrast between Data's logical nature and his desire to protect Lal's highlight his humanity. The episode also explores Starfleet's complicated stance on artificial life. It made me reflect on parenthood, loss, and family, making it one of the most memorable of the season. Yes, indeed, and it is a very heartbreaking ending. And the one part where Halftel, the admiral that was making waves, when they tried to save her, and he said his hands were moving faster than my eyes could follow, or something to that effect, where he was just kind of in awe of what Data was trying to do to save his daughter. And it is heartbreaking, especially knowing that Data, he doesn't carry that pain. He moves on, but that on some level, you just get the sense that he felt it, even if he couldn't feel it in that regard, for sure. One of the more humanizing episodes for that. Here we go. Episode 17, Sins of the Father. Another fantastic episode, Amr says, and this one features a surprise guest star, the late and great Tony Todd. I knew he looked familiar even under all that makeup and prosthetics. Yes, I have gone on record as saying that as awesome as Tony Todd was, may he rest in peace. Candyman, the Mortician in the Final Destination movies, so many other roles that he's been in, Kern is by far my favorite, and how I will always remember Tony Todd because he was the most badass Klingon not named Worf in the entire series, as far as I am concerned. I loved Kern. This episode was our introduction. And he says this episode dives into Worf's personal life and his Klingon heritage. It was intriguing to see the tension between his loyalty to Starfleet and his duty to his people was a central theme of the episode, and it created some compelling drama. The storyline also involves a lot of political intrigue, as Worf is tasked with defending his family's honor in a trial that could have massive consequences for the Klingon Empire. The guest appearance of Tony Todd added an extra layer of emotion and gravitas, as Kern's bond with Worf was powerful, even though they had been separated for so long. He says, what I loved most about this episode is how it explored themes of honor, duty, and family, especially in a culture like the Klingon one where reputation is everything. It was also great seeing Worf put to the test, not just physically, but emotionally, as he navigated the complexities of his own identity and his place in both the Klingon and Federation roles. Yes, Sins of the Father. Another fantastic episode that also has some ramifications down the road that are a little heavy and definitely a little galactic, if you will. I'll just put it that way. But keep this episode in mind as well. Remember how it ends, and just know that we're going to come back to this particular plot line later. Some shit's going to go down. Okay, some things are going to happen, right? This is the other part. The other great part about season 3 of this show is the breadcrumbs that it lays for other stuff that happens later on in the show, and it's really good, including when we get to that season finale, which, boy, I cannot wait to get what you've written about that. Let's keep going here. Episode 18, Allegiance. Ooh, that's another good one. He says this episode had a fascinating setup, with Picard being kidnapped and replaced by an imposter, while the real Picard is stuck in a bizarre artificial environment with 3 other individuals. The entire situation is shrouded in mystery, and the way the episode builds tension as Picard works with the others to figure out why they've been chosen for this strange scenario is brilliant. The alien captors and the different personalities in the group made for some great character interactions as they try to figure out who is behind this and what their motivations are. Picard has to use his resourcefulness to not only figure out the mystery, but also bring the group together and deal with the mysterious alien captors. And of course, the twist at the end is satisfying when you discover the true nature of the captors and their reasoning behind the whole experiment. It's one of those episodes that keeps you guessing all the way until the end. Yeah, the twist at the end of this was actually really good, really well done, and just speaks to the spirit of the show. Yeah, Allegiance is definitely another strong episode, as is this next one, episode 19, Captain's Holiday. He says, it's been a while since we had a Picard-centered episode. This episode focuses on Picard's much-needed vacation, which is hilariously contrasted with his usual stoic, no-nonsense attitude. The idea of him being forced into an adventure while on holiday is a great way to explore a more playful side of his character. We see him get caught up in a treasure hunt involving a mysterious alien artifact, a beautiful woman, Vash, and the usual mix of unexpected challenges. Picard's reaction to the chaos unfolding around him is both funny and relatable, especially since he'd rather be reading or relaxing than getting tangled up in this mess. He says there's something charming about seeing the captain in such a different environment, away from the pressures of command. It's also nice to see him let loose a bit, even though he's still very much a captain through and through. His dynamic with Vash adds a nice touch of humor, and the chemistry between them is fun to watch. I agree. He and Jennifer Hettrick had really good chemistry. Sir Patrick Stewart and Jennifer Hettrick, indeed. He said the episode has a great balance of humor, adventure, and a bit of romance, something the series doesn't often focus on. It's a nice break from the more intense episodes and allows Picard to be more relatable. Yeah, Picard has a few of those down the road. This is the first one. This is like the first big one that we saw. I know that he kind of had that little thing, where like he found an old flame in the first season, and then the thing with the lawyer and the measure of the man in the second season. But this is where this was deeper. This was more personal in this regard, and we're gonna see a few more of those types of interactions going forward. But yeah, this is another fun one for sure. Oh, here's a big one. Tin Man, episode 20. Amr says this is definitely a somber and emotionally intimate episode. The story centers on a telepathic alien, Tin Man, who is seemingly alone and isolated in the vastness of space. Episodes like these is what hooked me into TNG when I first started watching it. Sometimes it's just 2 people talking with really good dialogue, and it's great. Like the scene with Deanna and Tam, for example. The intimacy in this episode isn't just in the emotional moments, it's also reflected in the subtle, tender dynamics between the characters, especially between Tam and the crew. His struggles with his telepathic abilities and how it has shaped his life make his connection with the Tin Man even more profound. The sense of isolation is felt so deeply in this episode, making it all the more heartbreaking when things don't end well for the creature. The ending, with Tam being able to connect with the Tin Man in a way no one else could, feels bittersweet but also cathartic. It's one of those episodes where the emotional weight is felt long after the credits roll. Yes, I would agree, and I hear you on the bittersweet ending, but I've always kind of looked at it as more of the the peace that Tam was looking for. He definitely found and was able to achieve with Tin Man's help, right? Especially since he wasn't really going to be accepted anywhere else. The only one that would fully accept him was Tin Man, and they were able to find each other, and he also effectively saved Tin Man's life at that point. But either way, no, it is a strong episode. It is a very deep, emotionally challenging episode for sure. How about this one? Episode 21, Hollow Pursuits. Ah, yes. The introduction of a fan favorite character, if you will. He says this is hands down a very funny episode. This episode introduces Lieutenant Reginald Barkley. Oh, very funny, Amr. Yes, Broccoli. No, Barkley. A socially awkward but brilliant engineer who struggles with real world interactions and often escapes into elaborate holodeck fantasies. His behavior initially frustrates the crew, especially Riker and LaForge, but as the episode progresses, they begin to understand his unique way of coping with pressure. Meanwhile, the Enterprise experiences a series of technical malfunctions, and it turns out Barclay's unconventional thinking plays a crucial role in solving the crisis. I enjoyed this episode, he says, because it instead focuses on an entirely new character rather than the characters we're familiar with. Barclay is such a different character from the usual confident and composed Starfleet officers, and seeing someone so deeply flawed but still brilliant made him instantly relatable. He struggles with anxiety, imposter syndrome, and finding his place felt incredibly human. The holodeck scenes were very funny. The crew's initial treatment of him, nicknaming him Broccoli, was harsh, but I appreciated how they slowly learned to respect him by the end. It's a nice reminder that not everyone fits the mold, and that's okay. Also, the scene where Picard F's up and calls Barclay Broccoli instead was a very laugh out loud moment. Yes, especially when you see the horror on Picard's face when he makes that mistake and can't necessarily apologize for it, but he didn't mean to do that in that regard. Yeah, no, it is. And Barkley is, again, a fan favorite character. You will be seeing him again. Don't worry about that. And Dwight Schultz did an awesome job with that particular character for sure. Episode 22, The Most Toys. Now, I love how you begin this because you said, Data, no. Oh, wait. No, he's fine. He's all good. Just kidnapped. Better kidnapped than dead, in my opinion. Yeah, they weren't going to kill him in the first 5 minutes. Of course not. He says this is yet another episode where we kind of explore Data's psyche and put his ethical programming to the test, especially in the final moments where he's pushed to his absolute limit. It's rare to see Data in a situation where he's almost emotionally compromised, and it added so much depth to his character. The ending was especially chilling and ambiguous. Did Data actually fire the disruptor or not? The look on his face and his vague response when questioned about it gave me chills. I'll be honest with you, Amr. I've always held that he did. He absolutely did. And I realize that it goes against the conventions of him not being able to feel. But no, I've always said that I've always felt like he did fire that phaser. He absolutely did. And he absolutely intended to kill Kivas Fajo. And I wouldn't have blamed him. I wouldn't have blamed him one bit. Would not have shed a single tear of remorse whatsoever if Fajo had been incinerated horrifically the same way that Varia was when he killed her. She didn't deserve that, and that really pissed me off, and I wanted Fajo dead. I wanted Data to pull that trigger. I would have been perfectly okay, and that's why I believe he did, most certainly. But yeah, that's a chilling episode, all the way through for a number of reasons, no doubt. Episode 23, Sarek. He says, my only comment about this episode is Patrick Stewart. The scene of him after the mind meld is absolutely phenomenal. Also, when I heard the name Sarek, I knew it sounded familiar, especially after they said he was a Vulcan. It kept itching the back of my head until I had no choice but to look it up, and turn out it's Spock's father. Yes, indeed. I recognize the name from the 2009 film. I also hoped we might get a quick cameo from the late Leonard Nimoy as Spock in this episode, but that didn't happen, which is all right. But we did get a name drop. Yeah, so obviously it's different for me because obviously I knew about Sarek, but also Mark Leonard is the original actor that played Sarek in the original series episode Journey to Babel, where we meet Spock's parents for the first time in the second season of the original series, and also in subsequent recurring roles in the movies, because Sarek is in, I think he pops up at first in Star Trek 3, and he's in Star Trek 3, 4, and 6 at different times as kind of a cameo, if you will. So yeah, I'm very like introduced to the character that Mark Leonard played and inhabited and is most well known for. He did play one other character in Star Trek. He played a Romulan commander in Balance of Terror in the first season of the original series, the season before he played Sarek. But yeah, so it's interesting that you went into it, not being completely initiated to all of that and learning that at that point, like, oh my goodness, who is this guy? And now you figure out he is Spock's father. Yeah, that's cool. That would be an interesting perspective to learn that through. But you said, speaking of Spock, have you by any chance seen the documentary about Leonard Nimoy called For the Love of Spock? It's a really good documentary if you haven't checked it out yet. It came out all the way back in 2016. Yeah, I have heard of it. I have not watched it, but it is something that is on my list, a documentary side of the list, if you will, for sure. Because I love Leonard Nimoy. May he rest in peace. Episode 24, Menage a Troy. He says, episodes with Lwaxana are always fun and funny. Any episode she appears in, I know I'm in for a few good laughs, especially with how she always toys with Picard. The final scene where he recites poetry is absolutely hysterical. Yes, I love the last scene. That is my favorite scene in the entire episode. Amr, I will tell you that you are on a bit of an island because a lot of the fans do not enjoy the Lwaxana episodes, but I am glad that you appreciate the comedic value of those episodes. And of course, the late great Major Barrett Roddenberry playing Lwaxana Troi. That is, she was Christine Chapel in the original series. She was also number one in the original pilot, The Cage. And she, of course, was the significant other of Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek himself in that regards, in case you didn't know that particular history. All right, so now let's get to your thoughts on episode 26, The Best of Both Worlds, because you have a lot to say about this episode. So here we go, Amr. You said, let's just say this. Boy, am I glad I wasn't following this show when it first came out. Otherwise, I don't know if I could have waited an entire year for the next season. It wasn't a year, it was a summer, but long and interminable, no doubt. He said, hands down, one of the best episodes of TNG so far. Everything about this episode feels epic. From the return of the Borg to the inner turmoil with Riker and that final twist with Picard, jaw-dropping. He says, Commander Shelby was a great addition, Elizabeth Dennehy, yes. I love the dynamic between her and Riker. She pushed him to confront his own indecision about taking command, and their back and forth added real dramatic weight. It's rare we get an episode where Riker's internal conflict is just as intense as the external threat. As for the Borg, utterly terrifying. He says their cold efficiency and the way they just take Picard without ceremony makes them feel unstoppable. And seeing him as Locutus, that was a gut punch. It instantly raises the stakes in a way no other TNG episode has done before. That cliffhanger ending, perfectly executed. I can't imagine what it must have felt like to watch this live and have to wait an entire summer for part 2. Legendary TV. Okay, so I can say this, and pardon me, I was misreading. There's a lot of other stuff you had after this. I thought the entire rest of this email was about that episode, but here, I will say this, Amr, because you have not watched the beginning of season 4 yet. I will tell you that the story that I have heard is that the reason that the episode cliffhanger, which by the way was the first cliffhanger in the history of this show and set up a recurring device, if you will, where the season finales are cliffhangers that lead into the next season. This is the first time you'll see that. You're going to see it 4 more times, right? 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, indeed. The reason is because from what I've heard, there were contract disputes with Patrick Stewart, and they wrote this episode in a way to kill him off if they needed to and move on with the show without him, essentially with Riker being in command, which also kind of explains a little bit the whole subplot with Riker. And Michael Piller, the writer of this episode, said that even though it's really seen as a Picard-centric episode, he considers it a Riker-centric episode. And I agree with him, because really the biggest subplot of this episode is really not about Picard. Picard is there, but he's dispatched, and he's like the plot device, if you will, by the time, when we get into the second part of this. But this is really about Riker in terms of, like, He was offered command of the Melbourne. He wasn't sure he was going to take it. And now he's thrust into a command position where he can't join the away team. He's got to stay on the bridge. He's got to lead the Enterprise because their captain has been abducted. And he's got to do the thing. He's got to do what is necessary, including maybe even kill his own captain to save his ship and to save potentially the galaxy in that regard. And that's where that great cliffhanger comes from, Mr. Worf. Fire, right? Just imagine, I'm glad I wasn't watching this at that time. And I have a bit of story about this because back in the day, back in the 90s, during the last season of TNG, they did a thing called UPN. I think it was UPN at that time. They did a thing called the Star Trek Next Generation Viewer's Choice Marathon, where you could call 800 number and vote for what episode you wanted to be in the Viewer's Choice Marathon. And there are a number of episodes. They picked the top 5, right? And I remember I called in as a kid and I voted for that episode because back then I'd heard about that episode and I, kind of read about it here and there, but it's 1994. There's no internet like it is now. And like the resources for any information on this is like, okay, no, I don't have a lot of resources. I can't just look this up. So I really wanted to watch this episode because I kept hearing about it. And there are other episodes later on in the show that reference back to this particular episode. So I really wanted to see it. So that was the one that I voted for. And as it turns out, it won. Like parts 1 and 2 won, the as the number one all-time favorite that all the fans voted for, and it's still considered by many to be like the best episode of the show. And it won awards for sound mixing and editing, and like it's considered a hallmark achievement in the franchise, like with respect to what it does. So I can't wait till you watch part 2 and start season 4. And let me just also tell you that pursuant to what I've said, I've already told you about 2 episodes that you watched in this binge here through season 3 that have ramifications down the road. This particular episode has ramifications years down the road. What happens in this episode literally leads to the creation of one of the spin-off shows and also was referenced just 2 years ago in the last season of Star Trek Picard. That is how deep-seated into the lore of the franchise this is. There is an entire film that exists based on what happened in this episode alone, and I can't wait for you to watch all of it. But here, you finished season 3. That is amazing. I can't wait for you to get to season 4, but let's get to the rest of your email. I am so excited. This is amazing. He says, at long last, this is everything I got to say about Star Trek. Now moving on. Bear with me, Ray, and those who are listening. This next show I want to talk about is Daredevil Born Again. Yes, spoilers. Here we go. Spoiler warning of the show for Daredevil Born Again. Let's go. Moving forward. He says, I've been loving Daredevil Born Again. So far, I've seen episodes 1 to 7, and it has been an amazing ride. The dialogue, the pacing, and the character dynamics have all been top-notch. Matt Murdock's actions outside the Daredevil suit have kept me hooked, especially since we haven't seen him fully suited up yet, right until about the 6th episode. It's a testament to how strong the writing and character development are. Episodes 3 and 5 have been my favorites so far, with how the third just turned into a legal drama, and a good one at that. That ending was shocking, yes it was. The Punisher copycat shooting Hector point blank in the head is just absolutely menacing, and I really love that the episode ended with the sound of the cookies that Hector previously mentioned, making it even more heartbreaking. Episode 5 was set during St. Patrick's Day, which, like you, I always associate with that scene from The Fugitive. Yes, indeed. This is kind of like a great bottle episode. I enjoyed Matt's dynamic with this episode's surprise appearance from Yusuf Khan, Kamala Khan's aka Miss Marvel's dad. I found this episode to be very well paced. I was hooked from beginning to end. A lot of the consensus online was this felt like a filler episode, and people criticized for that, and I don't necessarily agree. I found the episode to be quite enjoyable. Agreed. My thoughts, of course, absolutely detailed on Flightbox for the last couple of weeks with respect to the show. He says, as for episode 4, the conversation between Matt and Frank Castle was brilliant, and the best thing about it, I've seen widely praised online, and I definitely agree. The emotional weight behind their exchange was on par with some of the best moments from season 2. Seeing John Bernthal back as Frank Castle was a treat. His portrayal of the Punisher still brings so much intensity to the show. John Bernthal is a damn good actor. Another favorite role of his was in The Bear. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. I'm sure you've heard of it. Yes, I have. That's like 3 or 4 seasons deep, right? On FX. Yeah, the list is so long. We'll see if I can get to that. He says, I'm excited to see how things unfold with the upcoming episodes, especially with the cops worshipping Punisher after what happened to Muse in episode 7. The show is truly fantastic, and I can't wait to see how the story continues to develop. Did he write this before episode 8 came out? Yeah, he did. He wrote this on April 6th. Okay, so Amr, can't wait to hear your thoughts on episode 8, because yeah. Boy, oh boy, we're waiting to see exactly how this show sticks to landing, and hopefully it does in the final episode of this season. He says, I've also seen the first 2 episodes of The Studio, Seth Rogen's new show on Apple TV Plus. 3 episodes have released so far as of writing this, but I've only seen the first 2. What a very funny show. It's a satirical comedy series that offers a humorous glimpse into the chaotic world of Hollywood filmmaking. Rogen stars as Matt Remick, an enthusiastic yet somewhat hapless film enthusiast who unexpectedly ascends to the position of studio head at Continental Studios. Thrown into the deep end, Matt grapples with balancing his passion for cinema with the commercial pressures of the industry, leading to a series of comedic misadventures. The show has very funny guest appearances from notable Hollywood stars and filmmakers playing themselves, such as Martin Scorsese, for example. All right, The Studio. Boy, my Apple TV Plus list is long enough, but yeah, The Studio's probably on it. All right, we'll see how that goes. But I've heard great things about it, I really have. He says, the other show I've watched was Adolescence. I've only seen the first episode so far. I'm sure you've heard of it. Yes, it's been mentioned here. I think one of the listeners mentioned it to you once. Yep. The entire first episode filmed as a oneer. The story follows a 13-year-old boy who's arrested for the murder of a girl classmate and how his family are dealing with it. I don't want to delve into more details as it's best to go into the show with little to know like I did. Yes. Man, I've heard it's chilling, but I've also heard it's really good. He says, that's all for now. Only thing left is a question for you, Ray. What's a movie franchise you always revisit? For me, I find myself revisiting the Harry Potter movies every year or two. I recently rewatched all 7 movies a couple of months back. They still hold up pretty well, in my opinion, in regards to story and CGI. He says, anyways, thank you so much, Ray, as always, for reading. I'm looking forward for the new Friday Flight episode. I apologize for the incredibly long email. I hope my next one won't be as such. As I'm listening to the show, I hear of the famous Anthony Dorsey, I hopefully remember the name right, lengthy emails. Hope I'm a close contender. Regards, Amr Osama. Yeah, this one's pretty close, Amr. It is indeed. As far as your question of movie franchise that I consistently return to, I got a couple. I mean, I would say, yeah, I mean, Star Trek kind of doesn't count because it's television as well. So I would definitely say for me, uh, maybe not so much a franchise, but lately I've found that there's like a handful of Scorsese movies that I always revert back to, and it's literally these 3: Goodfellas, Casino, and The Wolf of Wall Street. Those are like my 3 favorite Scorsese movies, and just out of nowhere, I'll randomly just feel like watching that, or I'll put it on to watch a scene, and before I know it, 3 hours have gone by. I watched the whole damn movie. Like that's happened to me multiple times with all 3 of those movies. I really enjoy all 3 of those. As far as like franchises, let's see. I'm looking at the collection here. What do I really revert back to? Honestly, Amr, I don't really do so much of that with movies. I revisit TV shows. Like, I've rewatched, like, whole entire television runs, sitcoms in particular. Like, I've rewatched The Big Bang Theory multiple times, like, all 12 seasons. I've rewatched all 11 seasons of Frasier multiple times. Mary Tyler Moore, which is, like, my comfort sitcom, if you will. Rewatched all 7 seasons of that. So that's really where I do the comfort revisiting, if you will, is on television, not so much in movies in that regard. So hopefully that answers the question effectively and isn't like a cop out. But thank you as always, Amr, for the feedback. This is Anthony Dorsey level, but it's okay, man. I love the enthusiasm. I love how much you've enjoyed your watching of Star Trek TNG, and yeah, can't wait to hear more of your feedback with respect to that, and also with respect to Daredevil Born Again. All right, gather round for this next one, people. It's another long one, but it's the return of an old friend that we have missed in the feedback circle for the last number of months. Philip Barker returns with an email titled, He's Back. And I know exactly what he's quoting. It seems like with only those 2 words, he could be quoting any line that says that. But in this case, I'm pretty sure he's quoting our new Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, in the new Superman film that we will all be seeing, more than likely, in the next couple of months. But very poetic, very nice. Let's dive into Mr. Barker's thoughts. He says, what's up, Ray? I know I've been absent from the feedback circle. That doesn't mean I haven't tuned in. I had to go back and look to see when the last time I sent an email was, and it was November 12th, 2024. Well, I'm here to mark my return, or at the very least, just chime in on current entertainment related news, events, films, or television that I can immediately think of. Obviously, since it's been some time since we had a feedback engagement in this manner, I may have a Dorsey sized email for you to glaze over. Hopefully, it won't run too long. Also, I know Anthony won't take that negatively or personally, but I love the fact, though, Philip, that between you and Amr, like, we've definitely, Anthony's email missives have, like, become a thing. Like, they've become a designation with respect to this show. I love that. That's awesome. I love the little dynamics that we all create with respect to this. No, I don't think Anthony is offended at all because he's going to continue to send his missives. But the fact that we have Dorsey length, Dorsey size, right? Like that is a designation that we have for the longer emails. I love that. That's fantastic. It's great. Great term of endearment. But he says, anyway, let's get right to it. Firstly, we begin, he says, with the other side of the fence, i.e., Marvel Studios. The latest film on their roster, Thunderbolts, I think is going to surprise people, he says. Given the way they have marketed the movie and the chemistry between the outcasts of the MCU, this film has a lot of potential to be something different than what we have seen before from Marvel. While I thought Captain America Brave New World was good, the other two films Marvel has slated for the year definitely have more of my attention. Florence Pugh is a large reason why I'm in for this film, as she is one of my favorite actresses working today, and I love her as Yelena Belova. It was awesome to see her on stage last year at San Diego Comic Con, in case anyone was wondering. Yes, that's right, you did see her. You were at Hall H last year, good sir. But the premise of having all these misfits being rounded up against a character like Sentry is intriguing. It will be interesting to see how that film climaxes. I got Suicide Squad vibes from how Sentry looks, just in terms of his presentation, the whole shadowy thing, right? And maybe that's why I was talking about this idea of it being Marvel Suicide Squad, which, some people on threads are like, we don't need to compare, and I agree, we don't need to compare, but I'm also not doing it as a negative in that regard. It's an approximation where it's like, okay, this is a band of misfits banded together, and Valentina, no, she's not Waller, but she's essentially the MCU's Waller at this point, right? So, yeah, the connections I think are intriguing. So like that's where I am looking at it, and if the aesthetic is close to what we've seen in either Suicide Squad film, then yeah, I think we are definitely in for something very different than what we've seen from the MCU in the last number of years, and I think that is intriguing, and there is potential. I know I was talking earlier that I read something about how the box office is projected to be lower than that of Brave New World, but hey, the Florence Pugh effect is there. There's a fan base for her, and if it gets good word of mouth, and we'll see what projections say. Like I said, it's all a crapshoot, so we'll see exactly what Thunderbolts does and what expectations it sets, if you will, when it actually performs in the box office. But I'm not rooting against it. I'm certainly not. I will certainly be seeing it on opening day or opening weekend for sure. So, but on to your next one. You said, as for Fantastic Four First Steps, the way I feel about this property is probably on par with how you feel about the inevitable X-Men revamp headed to the MCU post Secret Wars. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't heard the news from CinemaCon, but apparently Sue Storm is in fact pregnant in this incarnation, and that has me extremely excited. Franklin Richards, I assume it's Franklin given he's the older sibling, is one of the strongest characters in Marvel Comics, and is one of the few technically classified as an Omega-level mutant. His inclusion within this film, and hopefully the subsequent Avengers films, is sure to be a surprise for many. Speaking of Avengers, I was absolutely one of the crazy fans who watched the entire live stream cast chair reveal, all 5 hours and 27 minutes of it. Luckily, it was a slow day at work, so I had it on in the background. With every new name revealed, the anticipation for the next name grew, he said. The musical cues to indicate who was next was also a nice touch. When Kelsey Grammer's name appeared, I thought to myself, wow, what an honor it is to be the very first member from the original X-Men lineup to be officially revealed for an Avengers project. Of course, with the likes of Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, James Marsden, Rebecca Romijn, and Alan Cumming on top of Channing Tatum, I was completely beside myself. Alan Cumming was hands down the biggest surprise for me as far as returning X-Men members go. I also have no doubt in my mind that we will see them in something that resembles their animated Jim Lee-inspired costumes. If Alan Cumming's Nightcrawler has twin sabers, I will cream, he says. I will nerd cream all over the row in front of me in the theater. Oh, please be. Not really, he says, but you understand where I am coming from. I was about to say, please be respectful of the audience, of course. No doubt. I understand your excitement on this one, Phil. He says, unfortunately, I do not think Anna Paquin will be reprising the role of Rogue due to her current health issues regarding speech and mobility, which is going to be a real bummer given we finally have a Gambit operating with the X-Men. If they recast the role, I will not be surprised. I will say that with no cynicism either. I didn't mind her portrayal of the character in the previous Fox films, and to be brutally honest, I wouldn't be shocked to see the character not appear at all. Whatever they decide to do with Rogue, I will be okay with. I didn't know that about Anna Paquin. That was, that's a bit of a surprise here. That she has health issues? Wow, I was not aware of that at all. But let's see, with respect to this, I'm just catching up really quick here. Whoa, she walked the red carpet with a cane? A walking cane? My goodness. All right, an undisclosed health issue that has left her with mobility issues and difficulty with her speech. Oh, no. Oh, man. I do hope that she does okay. I was not aware of that with her for her at all. My goodness, and because I didn't have any issues really with her portrayal of Rogue either. And Phil, obviously watching X-Men '97 last year and reviewing that, I took an opportunity to, as you know, get caught up on X-Men the animated series, and I finally saw what everybody was talking about with respect to Rogue and what they were hoping for in the movie and what they wanted to see out of a dynamic between her and Gambit. And I get it. It still doesn't bug me with what Anna Paquin did and how they made her character because Fox X-Men, of course, is different in that regard. But I agree with you. My guess is they're probably going to recast because I just, to me, I feel like they're looking for some fan service with respect to a lot of these castings, which is not a bad thing. I'm not anti-fan service. I'm not. I am not anti-fan service. Uh, only in certain. I'm not anti-fan service in general. There are certain fan service things like the John Williams theme that I do have some, anti thoughts, if you were, just not anti, but not in favor of. Like something where, like, okay, I don't agree with this, but I understand it if it happens, right? But I'm not anti fan service in general, and so I do think that on some level, the fan service, since I already gave us Gambit and Deadpool and Wolverine, I do think that with all those other X Men characters, they're gonna try and give us at least a little bit of Gambit Rogue, like the classic Gambit Rogue that we're used to from X Men the animated series and the comics for sure, I would say. So I think they'll recast, and I'm with you. I don't have an issue with that either. And without cynicism, for sure. I'll be okay with it too. But he says, now Jean Grey. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the name's not announced and being kept under wraps for a later reveal that Famke Janssen will be one of those names. I loved her as Jean in the original movies, and Jean is one of my favorite members of the X-Men. Given James Marsden is reprising his role, my optimism for Jean to return is higher than Rogue due to the reasons I listed above. I don't think I need to elaborate on Deadpool or Wolverine. They feel like givens for Secret Wars. I could live without them in Doomsday given the already stacked cast as it is, on top of the fact that they had an entire movie to themselves very recently. If they show up in Doomsday, awesome. If not, cool. Marvel Studios has, for the most part, not disappointed me. There are times where I've been disappointed with some of their projects, but on the whole, I like a lot of what they have done. Yes, I would largely completely agree with that for sure, and I will defer to your opinion with respect to the castings and where you hope they end up. Me, of course, I'm uninitiated to a lot of the Doctor Doom stuff and certainly Secret Wars. Whether I read it or not before seeing the movie, I don't know, because I'm at that point, and I feel like a lot of a lot of Marvel fans should understand that the MCU, especially 17 years in, has their own canon. And, if we're looking for comic accuracy, which I don't think you are, Phil, but in case anybody is looking for like devout comic accuracy with Secret Wars or Doomsday, I don't think you're going to get it. I think you're going to get a variation of that comic lore that fits into the MCU's franchise and style that appeals to the general audience. They hope, right? Because they really want that. And lately, post 2020, the team up movies, the big huge team up movies, whether it's No Way Home or Deadpool and Wolverine, those have been the big sellers. Those have been the big winners, if you will. Other than Guardians Volume 3, which is the end of James Gunn's trilogy, those have been the big winners for Marvel as far as the box office. So they're going to go back to the well with respect to that. And yes, I know that Multiverse of Madness did well, and I know that Wakanda Forever did well. But since then, like with the beginning of Phase 5, they've have not done as well as they would like financially speaking, and they are definitely putting all their chips and all their cards on the table, pushing all their chips to the center of the table with respect to Doomsday and Secret Wars, no doubt about that. So we'll see. I will probably enjoy it, and I'm sure we'll find things to enjoy about all of them. But Phil says, as for Spider Man's absence from the chairs, well, Tom Holland is currently filming a movie with Christopher Nolan, and then from there we'll jump right into Spider Man Brand New Day. Whether or not he shows up in Doomsday, I could not tell you. It could very well be a case similar to Ant-Man and the Wasp, where Spider-Man's film takes place alongside Doomsday and leads directly into Secret Wars. It could be a movie directly impacted by the events of Doomsday and still lead into Secret Wars. Frankly, I don't really give a damn, he says. I'm just happy to get another Spider-Man movie with Tom Holland reprising the role. Now that he's no longer in high school and we're past the extended 3-film origin, we can go directly into what makes Spider-Man so relatable as an adult, and I find that to be some fertile ground not quite explored in previous incarnations too much. Tobey's sequels focused on him in college, but ultimately his relationships with the likes of Harry and MJ. This time, I think the focus will be largely on how Peter will be truly alone for the first time. No Aunt May, no Tony Stark, no friends. For the first time in any film, Peter Parker is truly on his own, and I find that to be quite exciting. No, I don't care who Sadie Sink is playing, and I'm not even entertaining the notions about her being another Mary Jane. That's a little ridiculous. Whomever she's playing will probably service the story they're choosing to tell. While the film is taking inspiration from does include the red-headed hero Jackpot, I doubt Sadie Sink is playing that character, he says. That feels incredibly too easy. However, Brand New Day does introduce a villain that had not been done in live action before, and I hope they utilize him, and that villain is Mr. Negative. Martin Lee had a role to play in the recent Spider-Man games from Insomniac, and I would be elated for him to get a cinematic debut here. I don't for a second believe that the Chameleon will be in this movie, he says. Marvel Studios tends to avoid villains that have been used by Sony for their solo efforts, minus villains from previous Spider-Man films who obviously appeared in No Way Home. So I doubt they will use Chameleon due to the lackluster showcase of the character in Kraven the Hunter. Not only that, the rat Jeff Snyder, Chattanooga FBI, yes, is the one peddling that story, and I've been keen to let people know on my own show how much of a vile dipshit that guy is and how he tends to miss more than most scoopers in the game, especially lately with DC-related news. Seems like everything he's tried to say about DC is flat out wrong or goes ignored and never comes to fruition. Remember Jurassic League? Yeah, me too. LMAO. Yeah, Chattanooga FBI. Just why anybody peddles his bullshit. Still to this day, no idea. With respect to your thoughts on Spider-Man, I agree with you. I don't give a shit who Sadie Sink is playing. And I think the people that are claiming that, thinking that she's going to be MJ, those are people that are just still mad that it was Zendaya. Get over it. Suck it up. The MCU has established its own... This is what I'm talking about. The MCU has established its own dynamic in terms of what it's going to do with these characters. We saw what they did in terms of making Aunt May the Uncle Ben of this particular Spider-Man's universe. That's where the with great power comes great responsibility comes from here in this MCU version, right? Doesn't erase the comics, doesn't erase Toby, doesn't erase Andrew at all, as we saw in No Way Home. Those universes still very much exist. So MJ in this universe is Zendaya. Not redhead, not white. Get over it. Seriously. It's not that big of a deal whatsoever, right? But you know how people are. So no, I don't think Sadie Sink is playing that. As far as your other suggestions, I defer to you on that one because entirely possible. I mean, we will see exactly what they do. But yeah, I'm very curious myself to see exactly what they do with the adult Peter Parker dynamic for this film as well. And yeah, I also would say that, for people worried about comic accuracy, I don't think this movie is going to adapt Brand New Day devoutly in that regard. I think, again, they're going to use it and fit it into an MCU version that will have some changes. And we'll see whether or not everybody likes it. But either way, Spider-Man does not fail at the box office, so Spider-Man is going to succeed. It's just a question of how much he will succeed. He and Batman are the only two that can really make that claim. But at any rate, continuing on, Phil says, for anyone listening, especially if you're new, you probably think, wow, this guy sounds like a big Marvel fan. That's true, but I'm arguably a bigger fan of DC. Ray, you know me. Even though there may be a decade of age between us, we're still part of a group of fans who witnessed the rise and downfall of the DCEU. We've been through the mud, and we've withstood hit pieces and criticisms lobbied against our favorite side of the fence, something Marvel fans have been now feeling over the last 2 to 3 years, and we've seen all manner of vile behavior displayed online by people who continuously target and attack Zack Snyder and fans of his. 1000% true on all of that, Phil. We're the veterans of this, no doubt about it. And he says, and now we're seeing it all over again with James Gunn. He says, I have my opinions on the sneak peek extended preview of Superman, and I'll get to it. Before that, I'm just going to reinforce what you said in your latest episode. We need to talk about Superman again. I was hoping you listened to that, Phil. All right. He says, in regards to both sides of that coin, they're both truly insufferable. I see a lot more anti-Snyder hate in my feed than I do anti-James Gunn hate, but it still seeps through. Largely because, as you pointed out, I do to my own detriment engage. I shouldn't, but I do. Although I find myself spending a lot less time engaging it for long periods of time. The time you and I used to spend arguing and bickering with dipshits on Twitter are in the past. I remember those feuds lasting for days at a time sometimes. Now on Threads, I'll entertain a few comments before finally hitting the mute block functions accordingly. I just do not have the patience to continuously engage with morons who are just trying to farm engagement from simple-minded bad faith bullshit. The people who are weaponizing the new movie to punch down on Man of Steel was not surprising in the least. We knew it was coming, we knew it was inevitable, but it just continues to prove a point about how some people aren't really fans of Superman. They just want to dunk on Zack Snyder because they know it's easy engagement. As for the hardcore James Gunn hating sycophants, I see more of that on YouTube and Instagram more than I see it on Threads, he says. Probably due to my algorithm, I'm sure. It's just as present, though. I've seen all manner of dumb shittery from YouTube thumbnails trying to clown on James Gunn and every single little thing he does with his Superman movie. Some from randos, some from people I once considered a friend. It's just kind of exhausting to pour your whole online persona into light grifting about the success or failure of this one movie, isn't it? Yeah, it is, Phil, but you know how everybody on the internet is, or a lot of people on the internet are. But Phil says, look, anyone who knows me knows I am the farthest thing from a James Gunn superfan. His humor doesn't gel well with me more often than not. I do not share the same sentiment as you do in regards to the Suicide Squad, but that is a whole separate conversation unto itself. I know, with respect to DCEU fans, I am on an island. I remember the vodka stream. Did you ever watch the vodka stream where I was on with Wonder Meg and Anthony and I forget who else was on it, but it was a good panel of us. I think it was the one where we were all wearing sunglasses. And yeah, I was defending the Suicide Squad more than anyone else on that panel. Everybody else didn't hate it, but they definitely were way more critical of it than I am. And you know what? It's all subjective. It is what it is. It was respectful at the end of the day, and I can still, call a number of those people friends, Meg and Anthony for sure, and certainly Dave in that regard. But even though it's been a minute since I've talked with him. But yeah, I'm on an island with respect to the Suicide Squad. I know this. I do. I absolutely know that. But it's okay. He says, I think Guardians Volume 2 is a disappointment I will never forget, but I harbor no hate for the man. He's made things I do like, and I think he is an accomplished writer and director in his own right. Creature Commandos was stellar. I still need to watch that. I am so remiss. How have I not watched that yet? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, he says, is an all-timer for the comic book film space. While I don't like Peacemaker, I did. He says, I think it's competently written, and I can see why people like it. Even if I think Christopher Smith is a jingoist tool bag, and my boy Vigilante got the Deadpool treatment. Seriously, Adrian Chase is one of the most deeply traumatized characters in DC, and I really don't like his characterization in Peacemaker. It's a far cry from who he is from the source material, but whatever. I'm not going to boycott about it. Yeah, a quick question, Phil. Does that mean that you like the version of him in Arrow better? I forget if you watched Arrow or not. Because that's where I first was aware of the Adrian Chase character. They do some different things with him, but like you said, he's deeply traumatized. So I'm wondering, even with those changes, was he still closer to Adrian Chase that you're talking about than the Peacemaker one was? I would suspect yes, but I don't know if you've watched it or not. So that's just a question that I have back, that you can respond to. I'm just curious with your thoughts on that. But continuing with the rest of your thoughts here, you said, overall, I don't think he, James Gunn that is, deserves hate in the way that Zack did and continues to get. But these guys are also filmmakers and people at the end of the day. It's fine to constructively criticize their works of art because that's all part of the discussion. This is all subjective, as you say. However, the problem lies with people who take their subjective opinions, find like-minded opinionated people, and then act like their collective subjective views dictate objective data and facts about art. And that, my friend, is the real bullshit of it all. Then you couple that clownery with the fluffy nonsense drooled out by the ilk of Tatiana Siegel or Dumberto Gonzalez, and people have all the ammo they need to launch a strike against, checks notes, artists and other creative individuals. It's quite frankly a sad life to live. Phil, of all the things that you've written, that paragraph may be the thing that I agree with you the most on with respect to that. And that's in addition, that's including what you said about Suicide Squad, because I know we're kind of diametrically opposed on that one. But seriously, like everything that you just said in those last couple of sentences, come on. Round of applause. Seriously. Could not agree more with that. Now, that being said, let's get to the Superman extended peak thoughts. Because you said, as for the Superman extended peak, it reminded me of the things I do not like about James Gunn, creatively speaking. He says, I do think the Fortress of Solitude coming out of the ice is a nice touch, and I like the symbol on the door. I like that we actually heard Lex Luthor say a line of dialogue instead of just looking pissy. Even though it was all prior footage we'd seen before to an enhanced Murphy Williams score, all of that was fine. Hell, the moment with Clark and John Kent makes me feel some kind of way. Not sure what the context is behind it, but considering my grandmother was a large influence on my life and these heroes I love so much, that moment of kinship between the two tugs at the heart a bit. I know James Gunn wrote this with his late father in mind, and the movie releasing on his father's birthday has meaning to it as well. Clearly, the dynamic between John and Clark in this could represent something to what he experienced with his own father, and I understand and respect the hell out of that. All that said, Crypto being excited to see him and jumping all over a broken, beaten Superman just did not make me laugh. And that's probably because the moment it happened, I immediately recognized it as, oh, this is James Gunn doing his thing, and I see it instantly. Phil says, I suppose the best way to say it is by me recognizing the irony of the situation, immediately coupled with what I know and feel about how Gunn presents humorous moments, I just wasn't surprised or impressed. My dogs do the same thing to me on occasion. In short, I know what he's doing, playing the scene for laughs, and the kids and I see it. I just kind of shrugged. Yeah, I mean, anybody that, was being rational about it, Phil, saw that and went, well, that's how a dog acts. That's how hyper dogs can get at times. And yeah. Did I necessarily crack up over it? No, it wasn't like a massively humorous thing, but I do think it was organic. I do think it's part of the organic situational humor that I do think DC does better than Marvel. I have said that before, and I will continue to reiterate that subjective opinion. I think Marvel's the king of one-liners and quips. DC's the king of situational humor. I think that was situational humor, and I know James Gunn can do both. I've seen him do both in the Guardians movies. Guardians Volume 2, I would agree, way too many one-liners and way too many quips in that regard. But I have seen him do both kinds of humor, so I do think that it will fit with what he's going to do here with DC, to be honest with you. But I hear you. Humor is arguably the most subjective thing within all these art forms, right? Because some jokes are going to land for others and not land for others in that regard. So but he says, as for the whole Super Sun healing mechanics going on in the Fortress of Solitude and Superman reacting in pain and to his bones and organs going back into place, to put it simply, I just think it's kind of unnecessary. And I say that as someone who's witnessed a battle-damaged Superman recover more quickly with a lot more distance between him and the sun in other versions. There are countless times this happened in the animated series, and the BVS nuclear sequence with Doomsday is another easy example that I could point to in terms of being rejuvenated by the sun. I see what Gunn is doing, and he's kind of taking an approach from both Donner and Snyder a bit in this case, by showcasing a sense of humility and humanity and real-world expression of how someone with that power set could heal from all that damage that quickly under a direct blast of sunlight, specifically from the Saharan sphere of the planet where the sun could be its most radiated. I just don't think I liked an over-explanation and visual representation of witnessing him being in pain whilst healing when it's been done more subtly in other incarnations, and that just boils down to execution and preference at the end of the day. Now, here's the difference between me and other people on the internet. He says, I'm not going to cry about this or compare it needlessly to any previous incarnation and exclaim Gunn doesn't understand Superman. He does. He has a fundamental understanding of who this character is and how he ticks, just like Zack does. The kinds of stories both chose to tell are just from different points of view. To sit here and waste time and cry foul on James Gunn for daring to make another Superman movie in the wake of the Snyder Cut, how dare he? It's such a waste of my time, he says. Going all the way back to when Ben Affleck was cast as Batman for Batman v Superman, even at that point 12 years ago, I had an understanding that one day he would hang up the cowl. The same applies to Henry Cavill and Superman, Tom Holland and Spider-Man, so on and so forth. Sure, they can come back and reprise the role if there's a story reason for it and a great director behind it, sure. The truly beautiful thing about some of these characters is that when their stories end and a new one sprouts to inform and reflect a generation. I don't doubt one bit, he says, that there are probably going to be things in the new Superman movie that I do not like. That extended clip of Crypto was a stark reminder for me of that notion. But to base the quality of the entire movie on that one sequence and immediately write it off as a flop, failure, or trash? Absolutely not. There are a literal less than handful of times where I have skipped out on watching comic book films on the big screen, and I can say with certainty I will be watching Superman come July 11th, because I align myself in the middle with both franchises. Batman and Spider-Man remain my two favorite fictional heroes of all time. Same here. And for years I was constantly asked which one do I prefer over the other, and it wasn't until a few years ago I had decided, you know what? F that question. They're both awesome to me. Sure, I suppose I could choose one over the other and claim a bias of sorts, but the last few years have really given me some grace in terms of where I lie within the comic book superhero genre. So when I see toxicity flourishing on threads that's thinly veiled as just my opinion, yes, I engage when I probably shouldn't, but only to a point where I realize, okay, this is enough for me, off to Blocktown they go. These fans display a gross, cancerous entitlement that muddies the waters of these conversations and discussions that are long past the point of civil anymore, and to find a cordial one is few and far between. The truth that you were speaking here, Phil, just you know I agree with you. You know 1,000% that I agree with every damn thing you said in that entire paragraph. And you know it's funny because look, obviously the whole thing with the Saharan healing and that's general audience, right? To me, like if there's one thing that I could tell the fans with respect to the Saharan Prime healing scene, it's that that's not for us. It isn't. Because you're right. We have seen Superman heal in different ways under the sun. And I'm glad you brought up the BVS example because I think that's a better example than the one that I keep seeing spread all over the internet by the cultists from Zack Snyder's Justice League. I know why they're using it from Zack Snyder's Justice League, but the BVS example is bigger because he was like that was a nuke. That was a nuclear bomb. Okay, that he was skeletal, right? Like his body was gaunt, right? And he just laid there dead essentially, and the sun healed him gradually, and then that great shot of him just opening up to the red eyes. I love that. That's fantastic, right? So yes, we've absolutely seen this done in different ways. I think really the first time that I remember seeing a scene that was devoted to sun healing for him wasn't even in the Christopher Reeve movies. I can't immediately recall of a sun healing scene, like he got damaged and he needed to heal from the sun. The one that I recall is Brandon Routh's Superman in Superman Returns, like who's an extension of the Reeve version, when he was recovering from the kryptonite shiv that he got shanked with by Luthor, Kevin Spacey's Luthor, and he had to before he decided to push the kryptonite continent off of the planet, he went for a recharge, and that was done very poetically and very kind of the Jesus metaphor and all that stuff. The Mario Puzo script and everything came out there, very obvious, right? But like that's the only other time that I remember like a healing scene in that regard until the Snyder trilogy in that regard. So we've seen it done other ways. So as far as the exposition and what they're doing, no, that's not for us. It's not for the fans. It's for the general audience. Because you're right, it is how Gunn is clearly choosing to humanize Superman. Because the idea is anybody else, not us necessarily, but anybody else that is not completely initiated. Because remember this is important. We are dealing with a situation where David Corenswet will be our third cinematic Superman interpretation. Third, because remember, Routh and Reeve count as one, right? So there's them, and then there's Cavill, and now there's Corenswet. That's it. There is a generation out there, Generation Alpha, that does not have a Superman to latch onto. They don't, because Gen Z has Cavill, right? Gen Z can say Cavill, but it's weird because there's such a divide in terms of like, Gen X clearly glommed onto Reeve, right? And then there was a 19-year gap between Reeve's last movie and Ralph's, Superman Returns, which was de facto the same thing. And then another 7 years goes by. So it's almost like millennials and a decent part of Gen Z didn't really have a Superman to glom onto cinematically. And so that's why there's a decent amount of fighting, in my opinion, between people who are fans of Reeve and people who are fans of Cavill, right? And now Cornsweat's going to come into the picture, and he's going to be the opportunity for Gen Alpha to glom onto a Superman, right? Here, let me look that up. I'm going to do the whole generational thing here. What are the parameters on Gen Alpha? What are the years? According to Google, it's if you were born between the years 2010 to 2024. Okay, let's just go with that, right? So that means that Gen Alpha was 3 years old when Man of Steel came out. Nope, not going to work. And certainly it's not going to work for BVS because they'd only be like, what, 5 or 6 when that movie comes out. So no, Cavill, they don't have a connection to Cavill. They don't. But now, here in 2024, they're in their teens. Gen Alpha is in their teens at this point, and a new Superman movie is about to come out. And this is where Gen Alpha is going to glom on to Superman. This is where they're going to learn about the lore of Superman at this point. And that's a big deal. That is a huge deal because now they'll have something that Batman fans have enjoyed. Like, think about all the Batman that have come out since 1989 and how they're the generations. We all each have a different one, right? Gen Xers and elder millennials can certainly glom on to Keaton, but if we want to, we could also identify with Bale. But the Gen Z could definitely identify with Bale because the TDK trilogy came out as they were growing up, right? And now, how about Gen Alpha? They could legitimately glom on to Pattinson or whoever the DCU Batman ends up being, provided the DCU gets off to a good start and we get to see Batman Brave and the Bold, right? So this is important with respect to the possibilities of a generation finally being able to have a Superman of their own to glom onto and learn the lore. And for them, the uninitiated in Gen Alpha, you got to explain to them the Sub-Saharan Prime healing. You got to tell them how that goes. You got to say, well, this is how it is here. And no, it's not the same as it was in Man of Steel. No, it's not the same as it was in Superman Returns. This is how Gunn has chosen to describe it for this generation. And that's what he's doing. He's going for this aspect. He's going for this angle. He's going for this way to humanize the character. And I'll tell you another thing, Phil, that I'm sure you've noticed, but I'll go ahead and point this out because I brought it up before. Have we seen Cornsweat's Superman smile yet? Have we? Have we? I don't think we have. I can't think of a scene. Have we even seen a smirk out of him? No. We've seen the brooding. He's brooding over like a coffin or something at Stag Industries when Guy Gardner comes in and fires off his ring, right? We've seen that. We've seen the brooding when the dude throws the canned goods at his head when the crowd is clearly giving him that BVS moment from in front of the Capitol, like, we don't like you or whatever, like the crowd is against him, right? We've seen like, cries of pain, we've seen anger, we've seen, defeat and like, anguish. We have yet to see, I think the closest we've seen to a smile is the flying shot. And that's like, that's it. What other smiles? Even with Lois, we haven't seen him smile. He looks like he's introspective or reflecting when he's holding that coffee cup talking to Lois in this extended preview. The same scene where he shares an embrace with her. So it's funny to me that the detractors and the would even be like, oh, well, this is clearly the hopeful Superman. He hasn't smiled yet. He has not given us the superficial, surface level hope yet that you guys keep glomming onto and attacking the Snyder Superman with in that regard. So whatever. I find that incredibly hypocritical for most people, but you're right. You're absolutely right with everything that you've said as far as the, dealing with those people and, not engaging them nearly as much as we used to in those regards. And I'm at that point too, where I have the grace and the wisdom to just move past that. And I'll tell you what, Hide for Everyone is a beast. I love Hide for Everyone. That is so great. I mentioned this earlier. The satisfaction of being able to just take their bullshit that they respond to me with and hide it for the world to never see ever again, and then block them so that none of their stupidity can ever be liked or shared with anyone else because I control whether or not they can say it. If they say it on my thread. I love that power. That is what strokes my ego with respect to that. And that is what helps me continue to ignore them and not engage them. I do use that as a mechanism to help me through that. So, yeah, I love that. And we are all the more better for it, and we are all the more saner and more rational for it, my good friend. So let's get to the rest of your email because I am making this a bit longer, aren't I? He says, Anthony, if you're listening, I want you to know I appreciated our back and forth regarding Zach's latest film regarding the UFC. For fans like us who are coming at this from multiple angles, it's not quite a simple will watch, won't watch situation given the factors at play. You are an excellent member of this circle, and I always value your insight, even when we do not agree, like about the rise of Skywalker. Oh, sounds like you guys had a bit of a heated discussion. I have had more heated discussions with Anthony, so I have an idea of how that might have gone. And I think I know what his position with respect to the UFC movie that Zack Snyder is doing is, and I get it. I do. I understand it. It's weird. I don't want to dive into it like too much here, but I'll just say that like because I didn't see your discussion, Phil. I didn't see what you and Anthony said on Threads. Now, I don't necessarily need to see it, that conversations between the two of you, but I will say that if anybody has any reservations about him doing a UFC movie, considering Dana White and everybody else involved, I get it. I do, especially, some of the criticisms that have been levied at Zack Snyder unfairly have had to do with his perceived political beliefs and how and it's like, no, okay, this is the same dude that he and Chris Terrio were consulting Ray Fisher and how to write Cyborg so that it wasn't offensive because they wanted to take it into account and be authentic, and they were allowing him to be a part of the creative process. No, we understand where Zack Snyder comes from as a person and where his heart comes from in that regard. So there is that, and truthfully, I would look at it as he probably is just he's a movie maker. He doesn't look at all of that shit and whatever, and he's making a UFC movie. He's not doing it because he agrees with Dana White's politics. At least that's how I interpret it in that regard. But I'm sure I know Anthony has some strong thoughts on that, and I can get an idea of where you and he disagreed in that regard. But you know what? The difference between us and the animals in either of the cults, gentlemen, is that we can agree to disagree and that we can continue to be civil. We can leave it at that, and we cannot let it get explosive. We cannot let, I mean, we can be passionate. We can absolutely be passionate, but we can make certain that we don't let it boil over into other bullshit and, sever the connection that we have as rational fans, because there are more of us than them, and we definitely need to keep our wits about us so that we can be better fans and so that we can ultimately enjoy the content that we're getting and be happier than all the other cultists who only are happy when they're miserable, right? So we can all rejoice in the fact that we're happier, better, and more rational than any of those efforts in that regard. So I'm censoring myself because this is not Patreon. But either way, I hear you on that one. So continuing on, Phil says, lastly, Ray, I'm just going to get this out of the way. Yes, I'm going to be buying a Nintendo Switch 2. All right. No, I'm not necessarily thrilled with pre-orders in the States being pulled at the last minute due to very specific political reasons that do not deserve the time of day in an email like this, but we'll address subtly in here for the sake of the topic. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Phil. I know how you... And that's the other thing I will say is that you, me, and Anthony, our political ideas are aligned with respect to that. We are. We're all on the same page with respect to that. Okay? No doubt. He says, no, the price doesn't bother me given the way inflation and other assorted reasons attributed to its price. It's still cheaper than some previous consoles from the past. Yes, the latest Pokemon game is probably the only new game I will be getting along with the console. However, I may do upgrades for both Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but the upgrade price hasn't been announced yet. Overall, like you, I am a diehard Nintendo fan and have been my entire life. You love Mario, I love Zelda. We are of the same brand. I wonder if you'll be getting one right away or if you'll be waiting to purchase one at a later date. Would love to know your thoughts. I will probably be getting one at a later date because my disconnection from video game playing since I left GameStop well over 10 years ago has been awful. I miss it. I need to get back to it. So I need to assess where I'm at with respect to all my consoles, because right now I've got an Xbox Series X and I have a red and blue 35th anniversary Mario Nintendo Switch. Like I have a regular one, right? So I need to assess if buying a Switch 2 is worth it for me, and probably not now, because also, to be honest with you, Phil, I'm kind of waiting for the political situation causing issues to boil over, because it's going to. It's not going to last forever. And at some point, politically speaking, somebody's going to cave. And I'm just going to give you a hint. It's not going to be the other side that's going to cave, okay? The mafia-like mentality that started this shit in the first place is going to cave, because one percenters like Tim Cook and Apple and others are going to say enough is enough, right? That there's going to be a boiling point for that. And so I'm kind of waiting for that as well, and also, like I said, assessing where I'm at situationally with respect to my need to get an upgraded Switch or not. So right now, I will say later date. Definitely not at launch. Later date, and plus there's other financial stuff that I gotta work on before buying another game system in that regard. If I'm being completely honest with you, so hope that answers that particular question. Phil says, I hope this wasn't too long of a read, but in fairness, I did warn you up top how long it could possibly be, lol. Regardless, it's been nice to take the time to write this and send it back into the circle. Life has been throwing me a lot of curveballs lately, and every month since my last email has just been one thing after the next, and trying to maintain a work-life balance has been slightly depressing. But as Alfred says in The Dark Knight Rises, it takes a bit to get back into the swing of things. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. Continue to do as you do because you are not bad at what you do. Stay safe, live long, prosper. As always, Philip Barker. Philip, I graciously and gratefully accept and welcome your return into the feedback circle. I understand that life, gets in the way in addition to finding a way, right? Ian Malcolm style. But yeah, I get it, man. The work-life balance is a bitch. And, for me, I've been trying to find a consistent balance for all these shows, and I think I finally found one that I can, try and stick to with this whole Monday, Friday thing and, doing the extra Patreon stuff on weekends for the movies that I'm, knocking off the list in that regard. So I'm hoping to remain consistent with this, with respect to this. That is my goal at any rate. But I know it's difficult. I know it's tough, and I certainly held no ill will, as much as I missed your emails. It is glad to see you back here in the feedback circle. I think this one might be longer than Amr's. I think we're definitely, it's funny, Anthony didn't send one in this week, but we've got a couple of Dorsey length emails for sure. And I do like that classification, Dorsey length, for sure. So thank you as always for the kind words. Thank you as always for the great feedback. It is greatly appreciated. You are always welcome here on the feedback circle, now called Friday Flight. Good sir, I look forward to seeing the rest of your feedback whenever you do get a chance to send it, good sir. All right, we've talked a lot about Superman in this feedback circle and haven't checked in with our resident Superman superfan just yet. So let's get to him now. Waliyu Mustafa. His email this week is entitled Once More Unto the Breach. He says, Hey Ray, hope you've had a good week. I'm just going to dive right in. I had to weigh in after listening to your rant about Superman and the new sneak peek. There really are some dumb idiots in this world who do not understand the character at all, yet they will tell you that Zack Snyder doesn't understand Superman. I mean, complaining that Superman shouldn't scream when he's being blasted with sunlight? Did you listen to what the robot said? 14 fractures, ruptures to his liver and kidneys. The dude was spitting blood before he called for Crypto, who, by the way, is a dog first and foremost. He just happens to have superpowers like Kal-El. I bet some people will turn around and say, well, why didn't he just fly into the sun then? Again, did you listen to what the robot said? What do you think is closer, the sun or the fortress? Idiots! So yeah, when Superman gets blasted with 292 Saharan prime sun in the North Pole, that shit is gonna hurt, he says. I dare one of these clowns to experience that kind of heat. They'd be fried in an instant. Y'all don't understand Kryptonian physiology. Go read a comic book or something. Now, why did I put those words in caps at the start of this paragraph? Because the fortress is situated in a location that, while it does get sunlight, is not hot enough to melt the snow and ice. It's that simple, people. Science! Wally is fired up. This is the most fired up I have seen Wally in an email. Don't piss off the Superman superfan, stupid cultist. Ugh. Wally says, anyway, I am done with those twerps. I make sure that if I see any of that kind of discourse or negativity towards James Gunn's Superman, that shit gets blocked. I will do the same for Man of Steel and Superman the movie. Why? Because Superman is bigger than any one person who's been involved in creating him and his stories since his introduction way back in 1938. If Siegel and Schuster were still alive, they would be telling these jocks exactly what they think of them. I did see this one post on Threads, he says, where someone said something along the lines of, it's okay to learn from mistakes. And it showed a series of pics about the 5 changes made between Man of Steel and Superman. It basically dissed Man of Steel for not being hopeful and such. I blocked the account. Yes, indeed. That's all that deserves is blocking. He says also, if you go back and watch the sneak peek again, listen very carefully to the voices you can hear in the fortress when the robots are carrying Superman. I've seen people say that it could be Jor-El and Lara talking in Kryptonian language, maybe some kind of AI of them both, or perhaps a recording of their voices from Krypton when it was still around. Who knows, but it will be interesting to see how this Superman interacts with his birth parents. There was definitely some Kryptonian or some type of language, probably Kryptonian, being spoken in the fortress when they were bringing him in. I did hear that, and I haven't seen a lot of people necessarily bring that up, but yeah, definitely heard that. And there's also been some theories as to the Jor-El voice, which I'm not going to mention because it hasn't been confirmed. I know people have been talking about it. I'm not going to mention on the show because it's not been confirmed at all by James Gunn or any of the trades. Have not seen any of the major trades confirm it yet. We'll see. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Either way, we'll find out soon enough. But continuing on. Moving off of Superman, Wally U says, let's talk about Daredevil Born Again. All right, spoiler warning again for Daredevil Born Again. Spoiler warning, Daredevil Born Again. Spoiler warning, Daredevil Born Again. All right, continuing. He says, boy, oh boy, this week's episode was explosive. I had no idea where it was going. I mean, I forgot all about Bullseye, and then we find out the real reason he killed Foggy. Then you have the juxtaposition between Matt and Heather and Fisk and Vanessa. We knew Vanessa would end up killing Adam because what else was she going to do? Beg Fisk to let him go? And as for Heather, the poor girl does not deserve whatever happens to her when she does find out the truth about Matt. Remember how I said the week before last about a potential three-way fight between Muse, Daredevil, and Kingpin? Yeah, switch Muse with Bullseye, and I think we will have part 2 of that fight. Especially given Matt took a bullet for Fisk. That won't make Matt and Fisk even, but it may give Matt some reprieve from being targeted by Fisk's task force, as they will instead go after Bullseye. That's entirely possible. I am very curious to see exactly how that dynamic is going to go forward. I was of two minds, he says, as to whether BB Urich knew that Fisk killed her uncle, but to have it confirmed that she knew and is playing Daniel and Fisk, I was like, you go, girl. Though I have a feeling either she or Commissioner Gallo will meet a fateful end by next week, because you just know there's no way he's going to be able to pass on the files about the members of the task force to BB without consequence. All right, you're probably right. I don't want you to be right. I hope they both live. However, if you're going to make me choose, take out Gallo. I can't. BB has to live, okay? Ben's already dead. We can't have his niece die as well, okay? So BB, live, please. BB Urich, please live, okay? Don't kill off the black girl, please. The black man already died. Her uncle already died in the other show, or in the first season, I should say, of this show, right? Don't kill the niece. Seriously. Take out Gallo. If you have to take either one of them out, okay? I would prefer they both live and, make it on to season 2. But if you got to take out one of them, take out Gallo, not BB. That's all I'm going to say. Just moving forward. All right. Okay, here we go. Season 7 of Black Mirror, he says, has started on Netflix, and we're already 2 episodes in. I have to say, I love this show. The way it warps technology really makes you think about how much we trust it and why we shouldn't trust it. I'm looking forward to the other 4 episodes, and I hear Love, Death, and Robots is back next month for its 4th season, I think. Not to mention, there's a new Star Wars show out on May 4th called Tales of the Underworld, and it's the origin of both Cad Bane and Asajj Ventress. Looking forward to that. And of course, Andor begins in less than 2 weeks. Yes, although I have said it before, and I will say it again, Wally U. 3, 2, 1. There's too much shit to watch. Seriously. Like, I was all preparing myself, okay, I'm good. I'm caught up. I'm staying current on Daredevil Born Again. That's awesome. I got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with Andor because it's 3 episodes every Wednesday because I'm not going to be able to watch it on Tuesday because I got to go to bed for work. So it's like, am I going to be able to do that and do episodes? I don't know. I'm going to find a way to make it work. Damn it. All right. And now it's like, oh, but Black Mirror Season 7 came out. I still haven't watched Black Mirror Season 5 or 6. It's okay, Ray. It's an anthology series. No, it's not okay for me because Ray is a completionist. Ray needs to finish things, whether they are an anthology series or not. I'm not going to watch season 7 until I've watched seasons 5 and 6. It's just how it is with me. So, I don't know. There's too much shit to watch. I'm happy that there's all these and Love, Death, and Robots. I've watched 1 episode of Love, Death, and Robots. Lucky 13 is the only one I've watched. The one with Samara Wiley, which that was awesome. And I would love to watch the rest of the show. But there's too much shit to watch. All right. And then there's this. He says, I saw the trailer for Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, and oh boy, does this look amazing. Yes, it does. It looks like Mission Impossible Endgame. Oh. He says, the culmination of all the missions Ethan Hunt has been on and that plane stunt. Tom Cruise is a different beast. I think I'll be seeing this one on the big screen for sure. I mean, I might as well, given it is the last one. Is it officially the last one? Seems like it will be, right? I mean, it feels like Mission Impossible Endgame, doesn't it? especially since, dude, they're bringing back. I This isn't a spoiler because it's in the damn trailer. Somebody screenshot this. William Donlow, the dude that he poisoned in the first movie to get him out of the room with the Nautilus so they could steal it with the wire work and all that, right? That dude. Remember? Like Kittredge was like, I want him manning a radar tower in Alaska by the end of the day. Just mail him his clothes. He's back. William Donlow is back in the Final Reckoning movie. I've seen the picture. Somebody screenshot the point in the trailer where there's like all these like flash frames, right? Somebody, of course, froze them, right? And took a picture. He's back with a beard, like he's been in Alaska this whole damn time, manning a radar tower. Like this movie is gonna be amazing. I cannot wait. Yes, I'm seeing it at the theater. I've seen all of them at the theater except for the first one, right? Second one, yes. Third, fourth, fifth. Yep. I've seen all the Mission Impossible movies in the theater except for the first one. The first one I saw, that was a VHS at Christmas that I was gifted the year it came out. So, yeah, I'm pretty good with that one. And I will be seeing that on the big screen. That's going to be amazing. Wally says, one last thing. April 18th is Superman Day, which also happens to fall on Good Friday. And that is good because it means I won't be at work and I plan on wearing my new Superman costume and possibly going to visit my local comic shop to see what they're doing for said day. And then again, they might be closed, so I will probably go on Saturday, lol. Either way, I'm hoping to have a super weekend with my family, even if my partner does not want to get involved, lol. James Gunn has posted that there will be some new Prince of Action Comics 1 released for Superman Day, so I'm hoping to get my hands on one. The marketing for Superman appears to be ramping up now. As of today, we're exactly 3 months away from release. Did he send this email today? Yes, he did. So, yes, as of today, we're 3 months away exactly from release. Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's the 11th. That's right. That's it for me. He says, have a great weekend, Ray, and give my best to Shonda. Thank you, Wally Mustafa. Yes, Wally, thank you so much for the kind words. Give my best to the other half and the family. Hope everybody is doing well across the pond. Indeed, April 18th, Superman Day. Yeah. Will I be able to get to an LCS and possibly get one of those Action Comics, the Prince of Action Comics one? Maybe. We'll see. But I'm also kind of hoping that we get a trailer that day. I know it's not guaranteed. You know, he said he was working on one. When the sneak peek came out a week or so ago, he said he was working on one because he said he didn't consider the sneak peek to be a trailer. Hopefully the trailer that he is working on is indeed for Superman Day. That'd be great. That'd be awesome. Fingers crossed. We'll see. Not, won't be I'll be a little disappointed if there isn't one, but you're right. The marketing is ramping up, and it really is time to ramp up. We are 3 months away. It is time to get that machine going and get it into the public consciousness and the zeitgeist and make sure that everybody understands, hey, new Superman movie coming out. Let's roll. All right. Thank you as always, Wally, for the feedback, good sir. All right, let's check in with Alex De Silva, interested in Star Trek, see where he's at in season 3. But of course, he's got some thoughts to share with us on some things beforehand. Some really brief thoughts before getting to this week's Star Trek update. He asks, did you see the Deadline report that Robert Pattinson is being considered for the villain role in Dune 3? If this turns out to be the case, how do you think this would impact the Batman Part 2? Depends. I don't know enough about Dune Messiah to tell you exactly like what character he might be playing, in terms of adaptation and how long of a shoot he might have. I will say though that balancing acts can occur, right? It's all about scheduling, and these guys, they understand how to work in a schedule. I don't know how many days the shoot would be on Dune. I really don't. I'm not sure, and I don't know what the timetable for their production is. Are they further along than the Batman Part 2? Probably, perhaps, but I don't know how long it will take him to shoot that compared to, clearly it'll be an extensive shoot for the Batman Part 2. So it really just depends on how long they're going to have him in the film and how much he needs to do and whether or not there's got to be pickups and whatnot. And, is there going to be, will he have to have a beard? Will he have to look differently than he will as Bruce Wayne / Batman in the Batman Part 2? I don't know. But I am not really that worried about it, to be honest with you, because I'm fine. I don't really, I'm not impatient about the Batman Part 2. So when it happens, it happens. It is what it is. So, I like the Dune movies, so I'm perfectly fine with Robert Pattinson being in the Dune movies. I'm just not worried. I'm not worried about it at all. So we'll see. We'll see what comes out of it. But continuing, Alex says, in Daredevil, Officer Powell already got one beatdown from Matt. After his actions and behavior in episode 8, it's clear that he needs another one. I hate that guy. Oh yeah, he needs, yeah. Powell is somebody that as far as I'm concerned, either needs to, end up behind bars at some point between this season and the next, or, just get got, right? Can he get thrown off a roof, Poindexter style? That'd be fine, right? Or can Frank get him? Can Frank Castle get him? That'd be great. That'd be awesome because he deserves for some Punisher style treatment at this point to happen to him. I'm totally with you on that. So let's get into your episode of TNG that you watched this week, The Defector. You said Picard once stated to be the one to record the events of this episode so that history can have an objective perspective. Is Data's perspective truly objective, though? He's loyal to the Federation, and that alone can lead to some bias on his part. Yeah, but is he loyal to the Federation as far as like their political aims, or is he loyal to the ideals of the Federation Charter? Which, I mean, the Romulans are aggressors, right? The Romulans are sneaky. The Romulans do some tricky shit. So I think objectively he can observe their tactics and he can observe their behavior, and I think in his mind, Picard is looking at it like, okay, I'm human. I can't, my emotions will cloud my judgment here. And, Worf is Klingon, so his emotions are definitely going to cloud his judgment. And the Romulans are the Romulans, so their emotions are going to cloud their judgment. So, yeah, Data is the most objective voice that they have, the most objective perspective that could possibly exist on that ship in that regard. So, yeah, that's just how that's going to work in this case. I get it. I get what you're saying, but this is where the you know Data, the lack of emotions, the writing in the script is like, okay, his lack of emotions breeds objectivity, right? Because obviously you can't have objectivity with emotions, but Data doesn't have any. So that's where that is heightened, and in that regard, that's what he means with respect to objective perspective. So Federation Charter, not necessarily Federation politics, I think. He says Jarek's monologue about looking down at his baby girl and realizing he wanted to change the world for her was particularly poignant for me since my own baby girl will be here in just 5 weeks. I haven't even met her yet, but I already understand what Jarek is talking about. Yeah, that was part of the more heartbreaking aspect of his arc and, what he was actually trying to do, being the good Romulan. And James Slane he knocked that role out of the park. He does such a great job as a character actor in this franchise. He said Picard staring Tomalak down and being like, "Shall we destroy each other?" I think he said, "Shall we die together?" During the standoff was a pretty bold move. It was like Picard's own version of Bruce Wayne's "You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts" from Batman '89. Yeah, and that part was awesome, right? Because Tomalak was so certain he had the upper hand, and then at the last second, it's like, "Oh, here come all these Klingon ships decloaking," and it's like, "Nope." Tomalak, he's like, "You still will not survive our assault, and you will not survive ours. How about it? Shall we die together?" Like that. I Picard, when he breaks out the stones, it's very demonstrative and it's very enjoyable and satisfying to watch. I definitely love that. It was very bold, but very awesome in that regard. And Sir Patrick Stewart just does a phenomenal job with that character and how he portrays his badassery at those times. He doesn't always unleash it, but when he does, he speaks very strongly and carries a big ass stick and has friends that will back him up as a diplomat in that regard. Alex then says, "In the end, I felt bad for Jarek. He was just trying to do what he thought was right, but his shame and sense of futility led him to die alone without getting to see his wife or daughter again. Really sad. But the fact the episode elicited these thoughts from me left me feeling that this was a pretty good episode." Yeah, the Defector is definitely one of the stronger episodes of season 3 and the show, I would say, no doubt about it. He says next episode is called The Hunted. Oh, that's an intriguing moral episode, no doubt. Live long and prosper, Alex. All right, a shorter one for Alex, a shorter one for this show, but definitely an update. Alex continues to motor along through season 3. Hopefully, he definitely heeded my spoiler warnings with respect to Amra's email earlier. It's all good. They're in different places now with respect to their watches, but we will still absolutely give them time and go through it with them because it's talking Star Trek, and I will never get sick of talking about Star Trek. That is my favorite franchise of all time, no doubt about it. So thank you as always for the feedback and the updates, Alex. Looking forward to more next week. And finally, we'll close out this week's Friday Flight with an email from Jared Cardos titled Superman, Daredevil, and More. He says, "Hey Ray, hope you're doing well." Thank you, Jared. Hope you're doing well also. He says, "To start, a couple of things of note from Friday Flight. At one point, you talk about how people will have a certain creator or period of time as their Batman or Superman or many other characters. And while I'm sure there are plenty of people who are like that, I've never been one of them. For me, my Batman is a mix of a bunch of different things." He says, "I grew up with Batman the Animated Series and the Burton Schumacher movies, and my first comic was Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. But I could also put in creators like Scott Snyder, Grant Morrison, James Tynion IV, Tom King, Doug Mensch, Mike W. Barr, Steve Englehart, Greg Rucka, Ed Brubaker, Darwin Cook, and many more, and that's just the writers, let alone the many artists that also define the character. I feel like putting your version of a character to a specific time or place is very limiting." And talking about the interview that Ben Affleck gave about worrying about his Batman being too scary for his kid, I definitely agree that how scary any version of Batman outside of maybe Adam West will depend on the kid, but I think there should always be a little bit of fear in any iteration of Batman. I think the platonic ideal of Batman is that he's terrifying to criminals and those who do people harm, but a calming if a little weird presence for its denizens, especially for children. Now, Affleck's Batman was in a bad place for a good half of his appearances, so I can get why he maybe didn't have as much of that in his iteration. But I would like to think that he would have if Snyder was able to finish the story they set out to do, but I guess we won't know that for sure for at least a little while. Fair point. Just to clarify with respect to what you were talking about in terms of my Batman, like my thing with that, Jared, is it's not that the idea of limiting it to just, oh well, this is my Batman and this is the one that I'm. No, it's not shutting the other Batman out. It's just you have a preference. Like I hear what you're saying in terms of like Batman the Animated Series, the Burton and Schumacher movies, and the comics and all that. You have a preference. There's one or maybe even two that you like a little more than the others. That doesn't limit anything, right? I don't feel like saying that Ben Affleck is my favorite Batman. I don't feel like that is limiting my perspective on Batman. Just like I don't think that saying The Batman is my favorite Batman movie and what I think consider to be the best Batman movie made to date. I don't think that's limiting because I still have the Burton and Schumacher movies. I still have Batman 66. I still have Batman the Animated Series. I still have Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. I'm not limiting myself at all. I'm just saying in the hierarchy, I have a preference. And that's all I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about like, oh, well, this is my Batman and that's it. No, everybody has a preference. You have a preference, Jared. I'm almost positive that you have a preference with respect to a Batman interpretation. Whatever it is, I don't know which one it is. It's entirely up to you. But I think out of all the ones that you listed, there's one that you prefer personally more than the others. And that's not a bad thing. I don't think that's a limiting thing at all. I think it's just saying, hey, this one's at the top for me, but I still enjoy all the others, right? That's what I do. It's what I say. And the idea that we can't do that, the idea that if we pick one, well, we're limiting and we're, closing out all the others. I mean, that's what the toxic people do. That's what the toxic fans do, but that is not what we do. And it's not necessary to do that in that regard. So just want to clarify with respect to, how I feel about that in that particular situation. But continuing with the rest of your email, you said, now on to your latest flight cast and some of these crazy complaints about the Superman preview. In regards to Krypto, I think part of why there's all this consternation about him not initially getting what's wrong with Clark is that in the Silver Age, outside of his first appearance, Krypto is typically portrayed as being far more smarter and well-behaved. The thing is, Krypto being a bit of a bad dog to start isn't even that new for the character. Outside of little Easter eggs of earthly dogs being named Krypto, the Superdog was gone after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and we didn't get a version of him until the early 2000s, where he definitely didn't start off as a perfectly well-behaved dog. And of course, he sends another image. This is of Krypto. What did he destroy? A dishwasher? Yeah, it looked like he tore up a dishwasher and is being scolded by, is that Lois? I believe so, yes. So, yeah, they're not happy. Lois is not happy. And Jared says, and even if there wasn't precedent, Gunn's still within his right to do something different with the character, especially since I'm sure there will be some sort of arc of Krypto being more of a good dog by the end of the movie. Yeah, and again, like I said earlier, general audience. The general audience, that's relatable. Anyone in the general audience that is uninitiated to Superman or not that initiated to Superman that has a dog will relate to how Krypto is behaving in that scene. And will probably relate to how Krypto is behaving in the movie overall in that regard. So that's also something to keep in mind with respect to Crypto's interpretation and the freedom of Gunn to do it. And remember that Gunn also owns a dog named Ozu that he says is not well behaved at all. And, he's drawing on his own knowledge as a dog and a pet owner with respect to this. So, I mean, it's not like he doesn't know what a dog's going to do in that regard. So, at any rate, Jared says, as for the sunlight healing, I believe you talked about it more in just how hot the sun is for even Superman. And while I definitely think that's part of it, I don't think that's all of it. Now, I haven't had the pleasure of having a bone reset, but between the context of what it is and seeing it done in TV and movies, I get the feeling that it can hurt like hell. But imagine being able to heal naturally from any injury and having your bones shift and move on their own back to their original positions. And not just that, imagine the same thing happening to your organs. So yeah, I totally get why Superman would be screaming in pain. Sure. You know what? It's probably a combo meal, Jared. It's probably a combo meal of his organs and bones being shifted back into place, plus the fact that it's 292 Saharan Prime being heavily focused by several lenses into his skin, right? It's probably both. It's burning and tearing him apart, or putting him together, I guess, restructuring him in that regard. So yeah, I feel like it's a combo meal. We can go either way with it. He says, now on to my thoughts on episode 8 of Daredevil Born Again. One last time. Spoiler warning for Daredevil Born Again. Spoiler warning for Daredevil Born Again. Spoiler warning for Daredevil Born Again. All right? Ready? Going forward. Jared says, or one might call it Matt Murdock's terrible, no good, very bad day. Seriously, a great episode that definitely kicks things into high gear for the season finale. It was really interesting seeing Matt spiral as he's letting his devil out. Oh, the spiral is definitely there, no doubt. While it seems like it was confirmed to be the case in interviews later on, Jared says when Matt was making all these connections about the Fisks being involved, I was half wondering if he was really finding clues that make a concrete case, or if he was just looking for an excuse to suit up and beat the crap out of the Kingpin. What's interesting is that remember when you talked about how in the comics Foggy had his death faked and was put in witness protection? The person who was responsible for that? Vanessa Fisk. That takes the theory that Foggy is still alive in the show from 90% unlikely to about 70% unlikely for me. And while getting shot is bad, I'm almost more worried about what will happen when Matt finds out just how Bullseye escaped. You know he's going to blame himself, and it's going to be kind of hard not to. Hang on. So he didn't know that was going to happen? Like, so you're telling me, like, that wasn't how I took it, Jared. Honestly, how I took it was he was aware that Bullseye was good. Because at this point, right, he's got to know about the enhancements. He's got to know that, Bullseye is pretty much being treated like a mutant or like somebody with powers at this point, which he clearly, kind of does, right? They're not powers necessarily, but his acuity and his lethality is definitely, like, heightened, right? So the idea that you would bash his skull into the table 3 or 4 times, let the devil out, right? You knew that was going to get, like, what is Bullseye telling him the whole time? Like, he wants to get out, right? And so to me, I don't think Matt did that out of anger. I think he was giving Bullseye what he wanted to move forward in the case, knowing that there was a threat that he would escape. That's how I took it. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's how I looked at it. I thought that was totally on purpose. Now, did it mean that he was going to end up taking a bullet at the gala later? I don't think he thought of that, but I don't know if he's going to. I think if, personally, and I could be completely wrong on this. I might be looking at this completely from the incorrect angle from what it's going to be. But I think that any guilt that Matt has is not going to be about the fact that Bullseye escaped. It's going to be about the devil being let out, and the devil goes, because that's what I thought it was. I thought the devil came out in that scene, even though he wasn't wearing the costume. But like the devil came out in that scene, not only in terms of his actions, in terms of like smashing Bullseye's face, but also in terms of like his behavior towards Bullseye and even entertaining the notion of helping him get out. That's what it looked like to me personally. And I could be completely wrong on that, but we'll see. We'll see exactly how that goes with respect to next week's episode, the season finale. So then Jared says, speaking of Bullseye, while you are right that he isn't a mutant in the comics, he does share a trait with one of the more popular ones, and that he does have some adamantium bones, like his hands, feet, and spine, and they've been linked to why he's been able to survive so much. Now, it probably isn't adamantium on the show, but I believe season 3 ended with them doing something to his spine. Maybe vibranium? No, I read this. I read an article about this the other day. Cogmium? So obviously it's been a minute since, and I didn't do a rewatch of the first 3 seasons of Marvel Netflix Daredevil, but I read an article just the other day that said that the surgery that Bullseye has at the end of season 3, it involves using, like, placing cogmium into his spine. According to the Marvel fandom wiki, cogmium is a unique metal alloy invented by Oracle Inc. Incorporated, noted for its characteristics of being a metal with a memory and its capability to easily morph into small blocks, making them easy to transport. It can also morph back into the original shape of its manufacturer when necessary. It says that when a supply of cogmium was stored during a midnight conclave held by some of Oracle's members, the AIM spy and thief Highwayman, pardon me, crashed in and attempted to steal it for the terrorist organization, only for his mission to be intervened by the superhero Iron Fist. Okay, so that's like the comic definition of cogmium. Now, there's an entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe wiki for cogmium, and this says there's a quote in here. Even using cadaver material reconstruction is hopeless. I disagree. The cogmium steel reinforcing framework can't replace pulverized vertebrae, Dr. Ayama. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, cogmium steel is a rare and valuable metal alloy common at the black market. And it was used by Kenji Oyama to create a reinforcement framework for his experimental surgery. As he was tasked to treat paralyzed Benjamin Poindexter, Oyama replaced his pulverized vertebrae with the framework made by Cogmium, allowing for the spine to be repaired properly. I'd forgotten that. That's how he lived, right? When he got thrown off the. That's not only how he lived, it's also how he wasn't, like, that bruised in court later, and also, like, at this point in time now, as far as his healing capacities and whatnot. So that's what it is, Jared. It's cogmium, not vibranium, not adamantium, cogmium. Or at least if we're harkening back to, the earlier seasons of Daredevil, which we certainly are, that's what it is. It's cogmium that's in his body, right? So whether they continue that or whether they just leave that alone and just never mention it again, we'll see. But either way, I think that's the answer, officially. So continuing, it says, also, while I get some of the reasons why people are complaining, I do think Heather is getting a bit of a bum rap right now. I've seen her be described as the Skylar White of Daredevil, and I think there's some truth to that. Okay, hang on. Well, hey, you know what? Let me just continue on here. He says, I think that being privy to Matt's mind and secrets and motivations makes it easy to side against Heather, but she's not 100% wrong. She doesn't know what we know. All she really knows is that her new boyfriend, who she's dated for a few weeks at most, is suddenly spiraling down the deep end, neglecting and ignoring her while doing some weird crap. And all the while, she's likely dealing with the trauma of nearly getting killed by and killing Muse. And while we're on that subject, I think part of why she's blaming Daredevil is that she's feeling that Daredevil inspired Muse. And while Daredevil did initially break her out of the bloodletting thing, I can see her seeing she saved herself by being the one who killed him. Yeah, okay. I guess my eye twitched a little when you said that she's being described as the Skylar White of Daredevil, because frankly, my position on people that have complaints about Skylar White is that the majority of them can take long walks off short cliffs. And the reason I say that is because I've seen some real disgusting, misogynistic opinions about Anna Gunn playing Skylar White in Breaking Bad. And to be clear, as someone that watched and enjoyed all 5 seasons of that show, she never bothered me. I understood her position quite clearly, and it was never this annoying character, right? I think that, unfortunately, you had a lot of people that glommed onto Walter and treated him as the hero, even when he was clearly the villain, and becoming even more of a villain as the show was going on. And so they looked at her as the impediment, but it was a lot of toxic misogyny that led to that. So that's why I don't like the idea of anybody putting that on Heather, because I agree with you. Heather doesn't know what we know. And I understand that as a fan, that's how I'm reacting to it, because she doesn't know what she knows. It is dramatic irony in that regard, not in terms of dumbing it down for her, thankfully, but like, just, we have knowledge she doesn't have, and so she's proceeding with the limited perspective that she's got in this particular situation. So I get it, and, I'm not, like, holding it against the character. I'm just, speaking personally as a fan in that regard in terms of how I feel about it. But with respect to calling her the Skylar White of Daredevil, no, that's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. No, definitely not. And I think there's a lot of agency that the Skylar White character had in Breaking Bad, and I think there's a whole lot of agency that Heather has in this show, Daredevil, Born Again, because she is not a damsel in distress. She is not stupid. She is an accomplished psychologist that has studied all of this and has a good head on her shoulders with respect to trying to figure out what's going on and process everything, the human mind and sensibilities, and is trying to get to the bottom of it all, right? So I don't see her as a useless character or a character that is in the way at all. And come on, and I said this in Flight Box, if we're being honest, we know that Matt's not going to he's not meant to have long lasting, fruitful relationships. He's not that type of a character. He doesn't have an Iris West or a Lois Lane or anything like that. He doesn't even have a Gwen Stacy or a Mary Jane Watson. He doesn't have anybody, as far as I understand, right? Now, maybe there's a comic reference to this that I haven't seen or am unaware of, but I'm just going off of my reference points, which is the Ben Affleck Daredevil film, extended cut, and this show, right? The now almost 4 full seasons of Daredevil that we've gotten on television live action, and the Defenders as well, right? Matt Murdock doesn't do relationships like that. Like, just doesn't work out for him because he spirals into the devil, and that absolutely takes a toll on any relationship he has, whether it's his friends or significant others. So under no circumstances did I think that Heather was ever going to be a long-term thing for him, and I expect that relationship will end in the season finale, or at the very least be extremely strained going into season 2, right? So I never had any illusions about that. So as far as her being an impediment, no, not for much longer, right? As far as I'm concerned. So we'll see how that goes, I suppose. But either way, continuing on, Daredevil in Civil War. You said finally you talked about how you don't think you've read any Daredevil in the comics except for maybe Civil War. I checked, and there indeed wasn't any Daredevil tie-in issues. But here's the funny thing: in the main Civil War miniseries, there's a scene that gets thrown out a lot in online circles where Daredevil is one of the heroes being thrown into Tony's negative zone prison. And here's the panel that he sent me, which is Stark. What is it? What do you say? Can we talk? Actually, he's barely said a word since we brought him in, Mr. Stark, but we found this silver dollar under his tongue. He said he's been saving it for you. A silver dollar? I don't understand. And it's Daredevil saying, guess that's 31 pieces of silver you've got now, huh? Sleep well, Judas. Okay, so I don't remember that. I mean, it's been like a year or so since I read Civil War, obviously. So I mean, and that's just a quick scene, and it's meant more for to show like how Tony is becoming this fascist, imprisoner, if you will, and Daredevil reacting to it. But Jared says, except here's the funny thing, that's not Matt Murdock. Around the same time in the comics, Matt was in prison after being outed in the tabloids as Daredevil, and to clear his name, he had someone else, mainly Danny Rand, Iron Fist, go around fighting crime in the Daredevil costume. So that's actually Iron Fist that said that in Civil War, probably thinking, what would Matt do in this situation? Something gritty and Catholic themed. So yeah, you really haven't read anything with Matt as Daredevil. If you'd like, I could maybe throw out some recommendations of good runs to look at, but maybe in the next one after the show is over. And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you for all the great content you're putting out, and I'm looking forward to your future episodes. Thank you, as always, for the feedback, Jared, and the kind words. Yes, I would definitely take whatever comic recommendations you have with respect to Daredevil after the show is over. So go ahead and send that in for the next Friday Flight, because this season will be over. We'll be talking about that Flight Box episode will be out by then, and we can definitely bring that up. Because yeah, I'm up for that, and I need to figure out what I'm going to do with both my Marvel Unlimited and my DC Universe Infinite subscriptions, whether or not to reactivate them, and when to do so and how to do so that I can start reading comics again, because it's been too long since I've read any damn comics, and there's a lot that I would like to read. The new stuff. Stu's recommendations for Absolute DC still ring true in my head, and I want to read that at some point. But there's also a bunch of older stuff that you guys have all read that I really want to read as well. So definitely, I'll take whatever recommendations you've got after Born Again season 1 is over. And yeah, we can definitely talk about that on the next Friday Flight, good sir. Thank you, as always, for the feedback and the insight. And that'll do it for this week's episode of Friday Flight. Thank you to everyone that sent in feedback this week. Thank you to John R. Thank you to Amr for his Dorsey length email. Thank you to Phil for returning to the feedback circle with his Dorsey length email. It's fantastic. And also thank you to Wally, you, Alex, and Jared as well for your email feedback. It is always appreciated. The circle has some good discussions today, no doubt about it. If you have anything else that you want to talk about, movies, TV, and other assorted media with respect to anything that the guys talked about this week, if you have anything else that you want to chime in for the next feedback circle, the next episode of Friday Flight next week, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram at the FLITEcast. There's also the FLITEcast Facebook page. There's the FLITEcast on BLUESKY, just at FLITEcast. And of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. Oh, and also you can comment on the YouTube page, the posting underneath this episode of Friday Flight on the FLITEcast YouTube page as well. All right, take care. Stay safe out there. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.